Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is my 1,000 subscribers celebration. Yay!
Woo!
Yay!
I got 1,000 subscribers now. Thanks
Yay. Oh, too late.
to thanks to so many wonderful people who've helped me on my channel, who have given me constructive criticism and told me different ways I can go with my channel, and have helped me do all these wonderful things. For instance, Peter, who's going to go for it, he got me my intro. I've gotten to go on other people's channels. They've spread around my channel. And recently, Apologia did that, which was really great. It was a lot of fun. And so that's how I got here now. And so it's pretty cool.
Was you surprised when you woke up and saw your subscriber jump, or was you like live watching your subscriber count? That's what I did.
Well, what's funny is we had to, Savannah and I had to drop my sister off at the bus stop because she's in middle school. So we had to get up at like 6:30 and drop her off at the bus stop. And so when I got back home, before I went back to sleep, because not starting my day at 6:30, I refuse. I released my video, my Darwin Day video on my channel, and so then went to sleep. Then woke up, found out that Paula G had also released his Darwin Day video that I had done for him, and saw that I had like 700 subscribers when I woke up. So that was quite a shock. But I also really like that video. It's such a cool video. I'm a cartoon.
You make so many good educational videos though. Like, it was kind of criminal what your sub count was. Like, I was just thinking, how is this person so knowledgeable? And you should have such a much larger reach. And I'm glad that your channel's grown a bit now.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad that I get to reach all these people and tell them about biology stuff. It's really neat.
Congratulations. That's awesome, Jackson.
Thank you. We've got some people in the live chat. Hey, I guess I can drop the link for that. Put the hangout in there just in case anybody wants to join. Because it's open to everybody. Except trolls. Trolls are not allowed. Melody, you know about the science of trolls?
I do. I largely ignore them.
That is probably the best. It's Poe's law. It's always hard for me to tell who is a troll, because they'll just get on, they'll say some ridiculous stuff, and then it's like, well, do they actually mean these things? You can't see their faces.
At some point, you've got to wonder, is like Poe's law taking place? Because like sometimes religious people just say the most absurd things, and I'm like, you didn't really just say that, did you? You're just trying to get me. That's all you're trying to do. And then part of me is like, oh my god, what if they actually mean that?
Yeah, I think that was kind of Bill Nye's reaction in like 2014. He was like, "There's a whole group of people who think the Earth is 6,000 years old. What is this?"
There's a whole group of people that think the Earth is fucking flat. Oh my god, sorry for swearing, Jackson.
It's okay. It happens on my channel. I don't really mind it. And so, but yeah, I loved it. I also love talking to people. And hello, we have another joiner. How you doing?
Hi, Jackson. Nice to meet you. Call me RSC or 227, whatever floats your boat.
Okay. Okay, I guess we haven't been in a chat before, but I think I've seen you. I do believe I've seen you around.
You may have seen me. I don't know if you follow Fiona Robertson. I've been on several of her biology and medicine chats, so that's probably where you've seen me.
Okay.
But
yeah,
I found you on TST and then subsequently on Paulogia's channel. So
okay,
your material is very good. I really enjoy it. So I wanted to come in and say hello and maybe join in on the conversation.
Okay. Yeah, we were just kind of
Nice to meet you, RSC. I think that'll be easier for me to remember. And hello,
nice
by the way, Scientist Mel.
Hello.
Nice to meet you, Anti-Ordinary. And Mel, hopefully you know me. I'm in your live chat all the time. So.
Oh yes, I think so. Yeah. I see you hopping around on my channel. That's awesome.
So, what's the first topic for discussion?
Okay. So, one of the things I want to point out was that I have an announcement to make. Yay! Thanks to thanks to a mutual friend. I don't want it on my face. Thanks to a mutual friend, I have gotten Mike Riddle to agree to come on my channel at some point in the near future. He hasn't contacted me yet, so we'll see about that. If you don't know who Mike Riddle is, he works for Answers in Genesis. He has his own organization called Creation Training, I think. It should be a hoot.
They have training for creation.
Like, it feels like you would need like train washing instead of actually training. That should be really fun, though. Like, I would love to see that, having a quite well scientifically educated person discuss things with a creationist. That would be entertaining.
So, Jackson, this guy works for AIG?
Yeah, he has. I don't. He's probably not on like the level of like Bodie Hodge or Georgia Purdom working for AIG. But if you go to Answers in Genesis, he has a number of articles there, and he has run events for them. Like RJ has ran into him at the AIG event in Washington, and so.
I thought if you worked for Answers in Genesis, you had to sign a non-disclosure, non-competition clause as part of your like employment. But maybe I was incorrect about that.
I don't know, that might be true. I don't know. At the very least, he used to run creation training. I know he did that because I did kind of part of a series of videos titled Evolutionalists, where I was looking at these videos that ultimately began because a nationalist wearing a red sash asked me to do it. Yes, there is a story behind that. So this nationalist with a red sash, he asked me to look at the series of videos about creationism and intelligent design, and so I did that. And I ran into Mike Riddle. He did those, but I didn't know who he was. It didn't ever have his name anywhere, so I called him just the guy, I think, or this guy, something like that. And so he was talking. One of the funniest things he said was that like natural selection selects, but only intelligence selects. Therefore, nature has intelligence. Yeah. Yes.
Well, to be honest, that does seem like pretty solid logic.
Down, but I don't know if it's valid.
Yeah.
In the same way, a sieve has to be intelligent because it only lets certain kind of pebble through.
Exactly. Yeah. My example or my counter example was an enzyme. Would he say an enzyme is intelligent? Probably not.
Yeah.
But
I mean, and then if you look at like bottleneck genetics, I mean, that's where you have just a few males, and for instance, I forget which example, Jackson, you might know this a bit better than me. With the walruses, there was like a bottleneck issue to where there was too much inbreeding going on amongst like a single male in this particular population. So you end up with really awful genetics. How intelligent is that? It doesn't quite work out so well. You end up with, more problematic traits that are sticking around at that point. So I don't necessarily think that's an argument for intelligence.
It's quite weird to say nature's intelligent, isn't it? Because like sometimes nature's really fucking intelligent in the case of like the electric eel and things. And then at some other times, like nature literally tells animals to blow off their penises and stuff. So it's like,
what about the halibut?
What about the halibut?
It's a fish that has a very distorted face because it is adapted to lie on its side. But with normal fish, with normal fish, only one eye would be on the above it. So what it has to do is to move the other eye on one side also. So you get like this weird, distorted fish face. Maybe it's not a halibut, but a flat fish, I think.
Yeah, I know what you're
Yeah.
talking about now.
Yeah.
They do look weird.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, you know, the practicalities of how natural selection has gone about things is not necessarily something that's would be considered intelligent, you know, to some degree. You just kind of work with what you got and you make the best of it. But that doesn't always work out the way that we think, you know. We do have, you know, viruses, we do have bacteria, we do have other things that kind of affect people and affect animals, and they'll wipe out populations of things. That's still natural selection, but it's not necessarily intelligent either. And I mean, it's just kind of how it goes sometimes.
Yeah. It's not even limited to just bacteria and viruses. I mean, there are fungi that do the same thing.
Yes.
Protists. I mean, you can think of like red tide. That's phenomenon is so visible that they can observe it from the space station sometimes. They can see the ocean change color. I mean, it's amazing to think that animals or microorganisms that are so tiny can have such a profound effect on the environment.
There was actually a recent study that indicates that our body, our human biology, actually evolved alongside parasites. And because of the adaptation of modern cleanliness, we no longer have such a massive amount of parasites in us, and they are no longer cohabiting with us and can't provide us with the benefits we need through evolution.
Yeah, if you're in a first world country, I would agree with you, anti-ordinary. But actually,
well, yeah, okay, that was a good
and things like that
caveat to add.
those things still terrorize, you know, third world countries. It's very sad because we have the medicines and we have the ability to prevent those things, but in places like India and Africa, we're just not doing those things, and people still suffer.
I think that was a massive generalization because there are so many different kind of parasites. The parasites I was talking about were mostly worms and relatively safe for most people to have, although not very comfortable for anyone to have.
There we go. Oh, wow.
Yeah, we have transitional fossils of this too.
Really? That's really cool. Transitional fossils don't extinct. It's just Satan putting them in the ground to test your faith.
Exactly. Now you're starting to understand, Jackson.
Oh,
I actually
wow.
had a student use that when I was teaching biology. A student told me the devil planted the fossils, and that's why evolution is wrong. And so
awesome.
I went, okay. You know,
I award you 0 points.
That's
May God
always
have mercy on your
convenient.
soul.
Pat on the head. That's nice, dear.
Another one was like scientists actually generated dinosaurs from chicken bones, and that's what they used to fake all the casts. And I'm going, what?
What?
I don't even know. That was something I didn't even know how to wrap my brain around that. And I thought, wow.
Yeah, but like the only way that would make sense to me is if science somehow managed to decode exactly what an organism used to be based on only its genetics. But then that would say that evolution is real if that was the case.
Well,
if you were making dinosaurs from chickens.
Well, you can. Well, there's this bleeding edge field right now called Paleo Genomics, where you can actually look at the genomes of ancient organisms, and you can use it to construct phylogenetic relationships among different organisms. They do it with prehistoric elephants. Like I did a video.
What was that? So what was that kind of relationship? What does that mean specifically?
Oh, so well, you can figure out the evolutionary relationships among these different animals. When I did my video, Elephant Evolution, a lot of the sources that I cite.
PC.
Hey, PC.
Hey, easy.
Are from
Hi.
Paleo Genomics. They take, you find gets preserved parts of these animals, and then you get if not too much time has passed because DNA breaks down. It breaks down in water, guys.
They
Nestle got it.
actually have a relatively intact mammoth trunk, and they were discussing about breeding it with an elephant to essentially bring back the mammoth, but it wouldn't really be a mammoth because it would kind of be like a half breed with an elephant. But
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, they have found so they found it or DNA for some of these like Pleistocene elephants, and they've managed to reconstruct a little bit of the elephant phylogenetic tree. The elephant phylogeny is kind of a mess anyways, though, because there's a lot of features that are convergent and things like that. But it's really neat stuff. There's actually a really cool paper on like a vestigial tooth in this one species of Gomphothere that they found. Some cool stuff.
I'll have to check out your video.
I really like the evolution of the elephants because the modern elephants we are familiar with have elongated upper tusks, basically elongated canines, if I'm not mistaken. Are they canines, PZ?
That's a good question. Oh, no, I don't think so.
I thought they were canines, but never mind that. There are also other elephants, or maybe elephant-like relatives, that have lower elongated teeth on the lower jaw. So they were kind of experimenting on all sides, like upper tusk and lower tusk, and only the upper tusks remain.
Yeah, pigs do the same kind of experimentation.
Oh yeah, they are elongated incisors for elephants.
They were incisors. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, the elephants, they did all kinds of crazy stuff. You had like Amebelodon with the shovel-tusked elephants.
Shovel, yes.
And,
that's a great one.
Yeah, the Gomphotheres were known for their 4 tusks, even though some elephantids convergently got 4 tusks like Stegotetrabelodon. And then some Gomphotheres also lost their like lower tusks, so they just had they only had 2 protruding tusks like Rhynchotherium. So it's all fun stuff. And so they ended up using paleontologists end up using the hyoid bone for or to reconstruct the phylogenies, which is a little horseshoe-shaped bone it's in the neck. Fun stuff.
It is fun stuff. It's just like nowhere on my level that I can contribute to the conversation. But it's really fun.
We should all become geneticists and paleontologists. Everybody.
Well, at least geneticists.
Who would be the doctors?
Genetics is fun, man. It's just a lot of fun. I love genetics.
I'm an orphan, so I've always wanted to get a genetic test done just to see what my genetic background is. But then secretly, I don't want all of my details stored on like my ancestry.com or something, so I haven't done it.
That is a problem.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think that's a really good way for people that haven't or don't have touch with their history to learn a bit more about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy around Ancestry.com because they retain and keep all of your personal information in regards to your genetic code. And because it's your genetic code, they'll also have information associated with all your family as well. And so that's a bit of a problem. That do you want them to be able to do whatever they want with your genetic information? Because you kind of sign away a little bit of your rights with that. So.
And that's why I chose not to, but it's not just Ancestry.com either. It's like all of them. I wanted to actually get it done, so I looked around most of them, and I found out in all of their terms and conditions, they have the right to keep your DNA for as long as they choose and to sell it on to third parties for whatever reason.
Yes, that's correct, Anti-Ordinary. That's a big concern. I have a couple of colleagues that are geneticists, and they will counsel people when they come asking about should I do genetic testing for XYZ? And they are very specific, saying we only use companies that do not disseminate information and do not keep your records. So if you're going to use something that's commercially available, there's always a risk associated that information could be used by some other person or could be hacked somehow.
It's like, look how much valuable information Facebook and other social media sites get just from that information. Imagine how much value is in the information in a whole population's genetics.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, but
it's
really
not even-
the problem is not genetics, it's capitalism.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree.
We should all strive to be communists, clearly.
Oh boy.
And
Well,
Or at least-
that's not necessarily the answer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit scary, especially with the trend we're seeing more. You know, in the U.S. we have insurance, and they go through and want your biometric screening to determine whether or not, you know, if you participate in biometric screening, they'll give you a lower rate, but then you have to have a life coach call you every few months to ask what you're doing to be healthier. This is a thing that's happened to people that I know. And so if they get access to your genetic code in addition to that, are they going to use that as potential discriminatory ways?
And there's actually some states in the US that have put forth laws to actually prevent genetic discrimination since this whole thing has come out. So I think that's a good step.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the danger
We have
is
to get rid of all those unfavorable genes.
to your point, Jackson, they don't even need the whole genetic code. A lot of the companies that are trying to make money or assess for genetic health are just looking at one or two specific genes, so they can just go and cherry pick what they want and come to conclusions. And that can be very dangerous because not necessarily, if you're aware of genetics, you know, your genome doesn't necessarily mean that your phenotype's going to be a disease condition. Just because you might have a bad copy of a gene doesn't necessarily mean you're going to demonstrate that disease.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Does it mean you have a higher likelihood to demonstrate that disease though?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah,
It depends on what gene we're talking
but-
about.
Yeah.
You can have environmental triggers associated with that. So if, for instance, diabetes might run in your family, you might have a particular gene associated with that, but you can limit your risk, just like skin cancer, just like anything else. If you don't have these environmental triggers to kind of turn that on or off per se. I mean, this is something that we see across the board in nature with people. I mean, just because you have the gene does not mean you're necessarily going to have the disease. You might have an increased risk, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Yeah. So in addition to capitalism, our other problem is this ignorance about biology and this oversimplistic reductionism that says there could be a gene for high blood pressure. No, that's nonsense. There's not going to be a gene for high blood pressure. There are going to be genes, multiple genes that contribute to blood pressure, and just sorting out the interactions. We can't do that now.
Most people like me are morons, and we just assume that we're pretty much written down in a book in our genetic material.
It's not because people are morons. It's because we've got the scientists. People like me have these models about how genes are translated into physiology and behavior and all this, and they're primitive at this point. They're really simple and crude, and so it allows a lot of dissemination of bad information on the basis of bad models. So it's not that the public is stupid; it's that they don't give us enough money to make better models.
So for the layman people out there, how worried should we really be about the access to people's genetic material or information?
I would be very worried, to be quite honest, because you know, I don't want people having access to my genetic code, because then my children are going to be affected, my grandchildren will be affected, my great-grandchildren will be affected, and you know, anybody else that's related to me, my sister, my brother, my parents, they're going to have all of this information. And it's like, well, she has this gene. Then they can work through a pedigree and figure out just from my code, what, my children would more than likely have, or what my parents had. And it just not only affects you, it affects every single person that's in your family. So I would be highly upset and worried if somebody just had unlimited access to my genetic code, because then it affects people in my life that I care about, because then they're compromised as well.
But again, it's not the genetic code that you have to worry about. I would be thrilled to spread my genetic code everywhere. Not the way you're thinking. But to have that information. Yeah. The problem is that insurance companies, for instance, will interpret that in unfortunate ways.
Yes.
That it will be abused by people who don't really understand the genetics. I've got my genetics on my face right now, right? Everything about my physiology is visible, and it's not so much a concern that people can see, oh, look, there's an old white guy. It's that society has biases about old white guys that we have to worry about. So we just have to change all of culture, and then it's okay to just spread your genetic information around.
Okay,
Yes,
so nothing hard then.
Well, yeah, just the ignorance. The ignorance is what's scary, because people will use what they can to control you. And yeah.
So I think it's quite worrying how much we really do know about genetics and how they actually affect us in our lives, because most of us, well, this is just me speaking on my behalf, but I'm not even nearly educated enough on the topic. Before I was slightly educated on the topic, I genuinely did think it was as simple as me being written down in my genes somehow, and it was just like a version of me, but just in a genetic form. And if you could print that out, you could print out another version of me. But it's much more complex than I am just my genetic material. And I do think, like, a lot of scientists and a lot of people that speak about genetics sometimes can pass off the impression that you are your genetics, and that's not really the case.
No, I actually recommend to people that they read Dick Lewontin's book, The Triple Helix, which talks explicitly about this. First thing he does in the book is debunk that whole notion that you can take somebody's genome and read it out and translate it into the person, because you can't, and we never will be able to. It's just simply that information is not there.
You can see that also in identical twins, because they are not identical, not even in personality often.
Yeah, and the identical twins also are grown up in an identical environment, or nearly identical. So that's another factor. There's a contribution there that's similar in environment, very similar in genetics, and you get similar people out of it. But
there are some, like, I look at some genetic twins, and is that the variant that look alike?
The identical twins, yeah.
Identical twins. I look at some of them and I think, oh my God, like, if I was your relative, I would not be able to tell you apart. And then I look at some of them and I think, you're not actually that similar to one another. So even amongst identical twins who share the same DNA, they can look quite different from one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to hop off here. Congratulations, Jackson. I'll holler at you a bit later. You guys have an awesome day.
Thanks for coming on, Mel.
Bye.
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 Yes, I had some aunts who were identical twins. And when I knew them, they were in their 60s to their 80s, and no problem telling them apart. So if you've got identical twins, just give them a few decades of wear and tear. No problem.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
One of them will wear themselves down quicker than the other, sometimes.
Yeah. Now, Jackson, have you taken any genetics yet in your classwork? Or no?
That will actually be soon. Should be soon.
Well, I was going to mention that there are some studies on twins that were separated at birth, in some cases where they were adopted by different pairs of parents. And you can see that a lot of times there are traits that will carry over even though they're raised in completely different environments. It could be different states, different countries. and they'll grow up to be distinct people, but they will share some things that we're just not able to understand and explain why they share traits A, B, and C, whereas everything else is kind of diverged because of their environment.
You have to be really careful with those
yes.
studies.
I want to say something about it too, because there are coincidences happen a lot, and if they happen, then we will see, aha, there is something going on, but most of the time it's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
It's also about like how much of the environment affects your behavior. So like they might have grown up in different states, but there might be certain key societal behaviors that might be what they shared in common. So it wouldn't be especially weird for them to share those behaviors because most people have those behaviors.
Yeah. Also, like the Minnesota twin studies is what everybody cites.
Yeah.
And they're deeply, deeply flawed. That when they say, oh, they were raised apart, that doesn't mean what you think it means. Often what it meant is, and this is what would typically happen. Imagine you've got identical twins. For some reason, the parents die or are incapacitated. They don't just randomly throw the twins around. What most often happens is they get adopted by different members of the family. So they're treated more like cousins than brothers and sisters. And that happened quite a few times in the Minnesota twin study, and they don't make a big deal of it. But these are kids who were in very similar environments, similar socioeconomic class, related families. There was a lot of transmission of that kind of information to them. Another problem with the Minnesota twin studies is they were terrible. They were terrible in their interpretations. I vividly remember first learning about the Minnesota twin studies when I was just a teenager, because the guy who did it, Bouchard, was doing the rounds of the talk shows, and he would get on there and he was quite the talker. He gave quite a spiel about these. And so, for instance, he would point out, oh, these two brothers were raised apart, and they both grew up, and they both became firemen, and they both married women named Jane, and they both had dogs that they named Spot. And I just wanted to scream.
I think I actually remember that.
Yeah, I wanted to scream at the television. Here I'm only a teenager. I can see there's a problem here. There is no gene for what you name your dog. I'm sorry.
When I heard it, I just thought, oh my God, this guy's a scientist. And like, I pretty much at the time thought you wear your genes. So I just thought, wow, that's just crazy. And I always now I'm a bit more educated, not really much in comparison, but a bit more educated. I always think it's never a great sign of credibility when people go on to talk shows specifically.
Yeah.
And this is straight up confirmation bias. Like if you look at two persons and will dig really deep in the thousands of personality traits or whatever, then you will bound to get some commonality between them.
Yes.
Yes.
That you can tell right away that these guys were looking for similarities.
Yes.
They weren't looking for differences, which would be the interesting question. But they were specifically trading on the fact that they could find these superficial similarities.
And the assumption that because they were separated, then therefore there shouldn't be any commonality is simply false, because there can be commonalities just because of luck alone.
Yeah.
Chance. Yes, chance happens, people. Creationist, chance happens.
I actually met I met one of the authors of Chance and Evolution, Dr. Charles Pence, because he works here at LSU.
Oh.
Yeah. Good stuff. He's a cool guy.
So what was that about? What was that book about?
Oh, it's talking about how much of evolution is chance, how much is not chance. And they interview a whole bunch of different guys to answer this question. Kind of like it's like an anthology. Was it John Brockman? Wasn't that his name? He did the This Idea Must Die. You guys know?
No, I'm sorry, I
Not
don't
familiar.
know.
I think that was his name. He like basically sent an email out to a whole bunch of different scientists and journalists and different people saying, "Hey, what's an idea in your field you think that should kick the bucket?" And I remember Dawkins said essentialism, and that was before. I was thinking it was before he wrote The Greatest Show on Earth, because he spent like the first chapter ranting about how terrible essentialism is. Good times. I also got a question from the audience from Beej. She asked me what is my favorite topic for videos. Wasn't that it, Beej? I'm sorry, it was a little while ago. That is a difficult question. And we got Jade West. Hello.
Hello. Mic check.
Jade
Hello,
join?
Yes.
everyone.
Hello.
Oh, there she
Can you
is.
hear me okay?
Yes. Now we do.
I wanted to mention something about, you're talking about the twin studies. When I was much younger, which of course was way back in the dark ages, I watched a television program, and the researcher, quote unquote, was talking about how, eerie it was that twins, even raised apart, had so many similarities. And one of the examples he used was this pair of twins, where one was raised as a Nazi in Nazi Germany, and the other was raised as a Jew in, I think, New York City. I'm not absolutely sure about that. And so the parents had been married. The father was Jewish, the mother was German. The children had been born in Germany. When the parents split up, the mother kept the one boy in Germany, and the father brought the other boy back here to the United States. And so he went on and on about how when these brothers finally met years after the war, all of the similarities they had and how eerie all the similarities they had were. Well, I was a teenager at the time, but even I could see how much bullshit there was behind this. This guy was reaching to find similarities between these two twins when there were very few. Like, to give you an example, he touted how they smoked the same brand of rare European cigarette.
There's a gene for what cigarette you'll smoke. Okay.
Right. I know. And the thing,
Capitalists
my
too.
first thought, I don't know, I was 16 or 17 at the time, I don't remember. But my first thought when I heard that was, well, maybe the parents both smoke the same kind of cigarette, because when you have couples, they do tend to smoke the same cigarettes. Even if they don't start that way, they end up that way because they're borrowing each other's cigarettes. So what's so unusual about that? But yeah, I thought you'd get a kick out of that. It just,
Yeah.
he had to prove his point, so he had to find things that were in common.
I want to add something to that. It's the same mentality that confirms our stereotypes, basically, and also our tendency to not believe that things are random. That there is something that causes, or maybe there's some causal connection between two seemingly random elements.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this researcher clearly did not try to look into why certain things were in common. Like I said, my first thought was, well, maybe both mom and dad smoked the same kind of cigarettes even after they split up. So the kids grew up and they ended up smoking the same kind of cigarettes their parents did. So what's so weird about that?
Yeah, in order to find out whether these commonalities are due to their to twins, then you have to contrast to a control group, for example, non-twins siblings, for example, and see how likely it is that they share the same cigarettes between them.
Right.
Because
yeah, exactly.
And smoke the same cigarettes, and I wouldn't say we're the same people. We just have a commonality. And I also think, like with the example of the cigarettes that you've given, Jade, that it can just be coincidence. Do you know what I mean? Like, that could just be a coincidence, and people like what they like, and they just coincidentally like the same thing.
Well, and it also could simply be there could be a genetic link in the sense of their sense of taste.
Yes, that is possible, but of course you have to look further into it.
Yeah, you'd have to look into it. It would be like having twins raised apart, then they grow up and you discover, wow, they both like dark chocolate. Well, that could be coincidence. That could be maybe there's some genetic link to their taste buds. We don't know, but it's not a very important thing, just like cigarettes. That doesn't prove anything. That's not a great commonality. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to mention that on the television show, they actually showed the two twins together, which was also hilarious because they were clearly uncomfortable with each other.
Oh,
I mean,
boy.
you can imagine the one guy was raised as a Nazi hating Jews, and he discovers he's half Jewish and
Oh
his
my
brother's
God.
a Jew.
Oh.
You know, they were clearly uncomfortable with each other. You could tell that by their body language. So that was not a very great example.
Wow, I did not know that. This is all very interesting stuff. I'll have to look into. Perhaps for a future video, we shall see.
Yeah, I will look to see if I can find that, but anything past, like anything before 2000 is kind of hard to find on the internet. You know, after that, everything's on the internet, but there's a lot of old information, especially something as crazy as this. You know, maybe somebody uploaded it, maybe somebody didn't. So that might, you know, it's a little harder to find older stuff like that. But I'll see if I can find anything about it. Yeah, look for twins where one was raised as a Nazi and one was raised as a Jew.
Yeah, but that does sound really salacious. Like it sounds like something someone would upload.
Yeah, it does. It does. You know, but even if someone uploads, who knows what version of the story is being told?
Right.
So,
Jade, you should look
Sorry.
at Phil Donahue's show from back in the 90s. I'm pretty sure he did several episodes on twins separated at birth.
You know, that's a pretty good idea. I used to watch Phil Donahue. Back in the night, well, even before
half
the
the
90s.
country.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and he wrote this really interesting book that I actually have a copy of it because I do that where he made some basic biological mistakes and creationists occasionally quote him, which again is hysterical. Wait, you're quoting a book written by a talk show host. It's a well-meaning book. Can't remember the name of it. It's in the other room. It's a well-meaning book, but he's a talk show host.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like me quoting
So
Jerry
what?
Springer.
Yeah, it's
And-
Jesus.
seems like a valid source. I like
I
that.
know.
Against creationists, almost anything is a valid source.
Yeah.
Joke.
Well,
What
That
joke.
is true.
A joke.
I know.
yeah. The thing is, though, that maybe Phil Donahue's made some mistakes, but he's no Alex Jones.
Yeah, there you go.
Imagine if
No
Alex
one in
Jones
the
got a hold of
world.
this. Yeah,
No
Alex
one in the
Jones.
world but Alex Jones is Alex Jones.
Yeah, Alex Jones would be arguing that the cigarette companies are implanting their branded genes into viruses and infections.
Oh, God.
Oh my God, I recently made a response video to him where he literally said, lock up and get an army to lock up everyone that opposes Donald Trump.
Oh God.
It's like, motherfucker, how much more Kim Jong-un could you get?
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
put my name
as
on
someone
that
who
list.
lived in Austin, I'm going to apologize for Alex Jones.
Well, he can't help it. He's got gay frogs on the brain.
Gay frogs.
Chimeric
frogs.
gay frogs, yeah.
Yeah, they're putting chemicals in the water that turn the frogs gay.
I know.
Yeah.
That's science, baby.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually true that there are endocrine disruptors that are doing that. So,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But the way he puts it, of course, is like next thing you know, it's going to be us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No,
Wait a minute.
no.
Wait a
Wait,
minute,
Did
it's
it,
too late.
though? I just
You-
thought it was complete bullshit from day
You-
one, but I didn't
Yeah.
know there was actual, like,
You-
that was real.
Humans are not frogs, and nor are they lobsters.
Well,
Okay,
also
that's
it's
true.
yeah. Also, it's too late for me. I'm already gay.
Well, I'm a tranny, so, like, I'm pretty gay as well.
Well, there you go. Too late for us.
The rest of you can be saved. Just make sure you buy bottled water.
Well, but the thing is that what they found is, for instance, in cities, you get a lot of, people urinate, and if you're taking birth control pills, you'll have elevated estrogen levels. So they're finding that there's more endocrine disruptors in effluent from sewers. And when they look downstream, they find that frogs exhibit some of these problems. But the thing is, frogs respire through their skin. So anything that's dissolved in the water, they're going to absorb more readily than we would.
Yeah.
I personally am not too worried about taking up this stuff from my drinking water. And even if you do, you're ingesting artificial estrogens. It's completely different from injecting estrogens at high concentration. So it's not something I'm ever going to worry about.
Well, maybe I should get myself some of that bottled water, though, to be serious.
Oh, that's good.
But,
You should call up. You should call up Alex Jones and ask where you can find the water.
I'll start selling it to all my trannies, just like
there you
fucking
go.
womanized water. What a catchy title.
Did you guys see that King Crocoduck also posted a video of Alex Jones when he was on Joe Rogan's show?
No. What was it about?
Oh, it was hilarious.
Explaining physics, I think.
Yeah,
right?
it's Dr. Professor, I think Alex Jones.
Oh my God.
Physics. It's hilarious because it's just 2 minutes of him. Is it 2 minutes? It feels like an eternity, but I think it's only like 2 minutes of him just rambling about physics. I thought it was going to be he says something and then King Crocoduck responds, but then it's like, nope, he's just going to let him talk.
I mean, I can explain why it seems to took so long, because the amount of stupidity is so much, it causes time dilation.
Yeah.
It's so true, though. He says so much stupid in like such a short amount of time. You have to process it.
Yeah. Although I wouldn't say that Joe Rogan is much better than Alex Jones.
Yeah.
I would say Joe Rogan's got better, but still, he still like holds true a lot of crazy conspiracies.
Yeah.
I just have one more question relating to what we was just talking about. Do you know you said that there is water making the frogs gay, essentially? Did those frogs exhibit homosexual tendencies anyway as a species?
No, they exhibit disrupted reproductive organ development.
Oh, okay. So it's nothing to do with sexual activity.
Well, they're is it serenum toads? They have orgies, basically.
No. All it is, and it's just a low percentage of the population of frogs exhibit a failure of their gonads to develop, and some of them exhibited things like having both ovaries and testes.
So wouldn't it be more accurate to say the water's turning the frogs infertile? The water's turning some of the frogs the water is turning a minority of the frogs infertile.
Or
correct.
Transgender, maybe.
No, not even that. Yeah.
Some weird distribution of a hermaphrodism where they have sexual organs of both genders.
Yeah, but again, you have to be careful in interpreting it that way, because you also get a larger proportion of frogs that have things like 6 legs and legs in the wrong place and stuff like that. It's actual physical deformities caused by gross hormonal imbalances, and it's nothing like transgenderism or homosexuality. It's really a pathological state.
Getting over how ridiculous it is to say the water's turning the frogs gay. It's pretty sad that the water's like deforming the frogs, though.
Have you guys, if you haven't actually seen the original clip of him saying it, you really need to, because he says it and he's like smashing papers on his desk and he's like, "I'm sick of this crap."
Crap.
He literally screams it at the camera. But like, what I don't understand is he said to the courts when his wife divorced him and took their kids because he's a crazy motherfucker, he said to the courts that, "Oh, I'm just a performance artist."
Oh yeah.
What do you think on that? Do you think he actually is? Because part of me is like, no motherfucker ever born in existence can be this fucking crazy.
Oh, I don't.
I don't want to diagnose people online or over their TV shows.
Oh,
But he does
also,
I don't
very good at
think crazy
confabulating.
is a clinical diagnosis.
oh my goodness, RJ Downard
Yeah.
Hello.
and Midnight
RJ.
Sparkle.
And
Hello.
Midnight. Hello, Midnight.
You
Hello,
probably
RJ.
should have posted it in the chat, but hello either way.
There's a lot of noise coming from
Turn off my
someone's.
radio here.
There we go.
There we go.
You might want to delete.
James, you have something in the background.
There we go.
Jackson, you might want to delete the link in the chat.
Yeah.
What
Okay.
Jackson, the link in the chat is a bit risky.
Yeah, you should just ask Nestle to give it to me privately.
I don't know. Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. Retract.
There we go.
There we go.
No harm done, hopefully.
So to
Well-
return to the original point, I
Yes.
don't think Alex Jones is crazy, but I think he's serious about these things. And the reason I think that is because there are a lot of people who believe him.
Yeah.
And we would have to argue that all of his listeners are totally insane or totally faking it to say that it's impossible for somebody to be that nuts.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And he's part of a long tradition.
Yes.
I don't go back to radio, but I do have a memory of people like Joe Pine and Mark Downey Jr., who are on television.
Or Art
and-
Bell. Yeah.
Oh, Art Bell.
Yeah.
Yes, Art Bell.
Or
Yeah, for decades we've
methodologically,
heard
Father Coughlin back in the 20s.
Yeah.
This is nothing
Oh
new.
yes, Father Coughlin, who was part of the whole, the Red Scare.
America First right wing opposition to liberalized sexual rules. Does this all sound kind of familiar?
Yeah.
So yeah, but my point is that just because loads of people believe like loads of different conspiracy theories, I think personally, wouldn't it be a bit more logical that he's just trying to make money off of them? Because maybe I'm wrong, maybe he's just batshit, but like I just think.
Well, I mean, it could be both, honestly.
Yeah.
It could
Make
be.
money off
Yeah.
this batshit,
Money
and he
becomes
believes
a
in himself.
rationalizer and an enabler and a reinforcement tool. Ken Ham is a perfectly fine exemplar here. I believe Ken Ham believes everything he says. He's also pulling down $200,000 a year and was just disinvited from a $4,500 speaking gig at a college. Jerry Coyne's been railing on
I think
about
they
all that
reinvited
stuff.
him.
And that reinforces the dynamic, but they don't have to not believe what they say. It helps if they believe what they say. There may be a flim-flam element to Jones as a theatrical enterprise, in the same way the spiritualist movement in particular, an awful lot of those people know full well that they're just bullshitting, psychics and other kinds of things. But I think that's a relatively minor phenomenon. And the people who follow him, PZ is quite right. The people who follow him really believe this stuff. And if you probe them on methods questions, and I follow him on Twitter, so I get these interactions, they're the same dynamic that you find with Dinesh D'Souzaistas, with Ann Coulterists, with Trump-Hovindists, it doesn't matter what. They're people who depend on secondary sources and never fact check a damn thing. They literally don't think they need to do that.
Yeah, it's, I blame them a little bit, but I also blame their lack of education, or I don't know. There's a lot of factors to think about when you talk about this stuff. You can't just say, "Oh, they're idiots; they believe it." Okay, but why? Well,
Yeah,
Why
but
they
it's
be
bad,
idiots?
isn't it? Because Alex Jones said
okay,
to
poor
someone that
choice of
the
words on my
whole
part.
hurricane. Alex Jones said to someone that the whole hurricanes recently in the US was just a government conspiracy to get people out of the way to do some crazy things in their neighborhood. And so this woman, who's the mother of 3 kids and one teenager, decided that no, she was just going to stay in her house instead of evacuating because Alex Jones told her it was a conspiracy. And that is
Sorry,
fucking
I didn't mean
it's
to laugh
funny
at that.
now because she's probably still alive, hopefully.
No, I know, but
It's ridiculous that someone can affect someone to make life-risking decisions over the internet.
I know.
But
Never mind. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say on some that RJ had mentioned, and really any of these, as RJ calls them, Tortukans, if you present any evidence to them, it seems like they always run and hide, or they delete comments you might respond to with them and demonstrate where, they might be wrong. And it's, and I know, if you make enough money, you can make yourself believe anything you want with Kid Ham.
Yeah, you just got to put your dark glasses on.
Yeah, and it helps, actually, ironically, the dangerous ones are ones who are really bright. They're not stupid people. Philip Johnson, Richard Milton, these various other ones, it reinforces, because they can't imagine that they're just stupid. They feel accomplished and enabled, especially if they're raking in the cash.
This is all just opinion, though, but I think there's a difference between believe and lie. And like Alex Jones says things that are completely contradictory to what he said prior. Like I just mentioned, he said earlier in the stream, he said he wanted to have everyone that supports Trump military locked up so that they can't oppose Trump. But like forever, he's been saying how it's terrible, the police are militarized and stuff like that. So part of me just thinks some of them might believe this craziness, some of them might believe this craziness, but does that mean Alex Jones does, or is he just lying to them to sell them his Superman vitamins?
I think he's honestly, I think he's lying personally. He said too many things that make me question whether he's being totally honest. And the thing is, you have to remember, it's only bad, according to Trump, when it's another group that's outside you. But when it's part of your in-group, it's perfectly fine. What I found funny is I got a YouTube comment thing, and I had a full long comment that I left him with about, I think I put 10 sources links into things that I was saying to back me up. But apparently, because I'm not a supporter of Trump, I am a far left libertarian, fascist, communist, Nazi loving atheist, because I mentioned I was atheist.
Yeah, people
don't know how much
categorize you.
Yeah,
by what they think you are. So they decide what you believe based on what they think you believe as they're circling the wagons. That happens an awful lot in all various sides. It's very easy for people to snap judgment.
Yes. Let's let Cap finish.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so it was really funny. I actually was called. There was a guy recently who came on, or who I was talking to, I think because of RJ, because RJ constantly jousts with creationists, and so I tried helping this guy, and he just said, "What?" He said, "Well, you're just another evolutionist liberal," and then blocked me.
Yeah, it's always funny, when you get those, and it's like they throw so many things that are contradictory at you, or that just don't even fit in. Like I was like the whole fascist and communist. You can't get really much more polar opposite than those two.
Oh, well, Dinesh D'Souza has been making a big deal arguing that Nazis and the fascist movement are actually left-wing progressive tools. They have nothing to do with the right wing, and your jaw drops at the historical revisionism of it. But when you look at his method, well, it's easy peasy for him to do that. He just avoids all the data that doesn't fit.
Oh God, I hate to go here, and I'm gonna violate Godwin's law, but Hitler was far right. Marx.
Well, there's a tiny nugget of truth to it, because it was the National Socialist Workers' Party. Although he didn't found it, he was sent there as an agent provocateur by the regime, the Republic, Weimar, to spy on them, and then he takes over the party. The Italian fascists actually have a better case, because they come from the futurist movement, which was coming up just before World War I, and it was highly technologically oriented. It was anti-traditional. It was anti-aristocrat. There were a whole bunch of traditions that fitted into the kind of weird populist bravado, air quotes, socialism that you eventually got in the fascist movement. But in terms of who they supported, All you need to do is to look at the Spanish Civil War and which side the leftists are fighting on, which side the rightists are fighting on, and you can pretty well tell who the players are.
Yeah, and the thing that always, I guess, one of the things that always makes gets my really just irks me a bit on some of these types of people is that when they are the extremes, and when you try and point that out with people that no, this is not what reasonable people mean to their followers, it's like, oh, you might as well just shot their mother, father, brother, sister, and their baby right in front of them.
You have to remember the brain
enemy.
There's a brain system that plays a role here. The thing that in our brain, and Sam Harris did a report on this, I think about 2009, if memory serves me, with a bunch of other cognitive people. They identified the 3 brain systems that tells you about belief. We've got a I believe it part, we have a separate I don't believe it part, and another I don't know part. The I don't believe it part literally is hitchhiking off of the revulsion that you feel when you taste bad things. So the intensity of I don't believe you is visceral, and it reinforces a lot of hatred, prejudices naturally in the biochemistry. So it doesn't surprise me. It makes me gobsmacked and worried, but it doesn't surprise me.
I see PG Myers a bit, I don't know, is it right, PG Myers?
I think it's an example of neuroscientific reductionism carried to an extreme. I don't believe a word of it. That there's too many systems tangled up, and that what too many of these kinds of simple-minded cognitive neuroscientists try to do is reduce it all to a couple of modules. And no, it's one big tangle in there. Come on.
And correct me if
the brain system that does that does other stuff, and they've identified that as well. Did you read Sam's paper on that?
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think if I remember correctly from a report I read, and it actually came from Utah, from a Mormon group who did it, which I found rather interesting. And they were looking at the brain activity, but the brain. All right, I'm not gonna make the joke. That's too easy. But they were looking at the brain activity of people when doing religious things, and they showed that the religion part and the part that you use of your brain that activates when you're activating your beliefs, quote unquote, of in the religion by doing the religious, tenets or rituals, I guess is actually the word I'm looking for, or you're praying or whatever you're doing, actually lights up the same parts of the brain as what lights in the pleasure centers as in when using drugs. And we're talking the hard drug stuff. And they found that correlation. And I
disagree with you.
Huh?
When you say like the hardcore drugs, I'm assuming you mean like heroin. You mean like PCP,
the parts that really affect, like I think they actually used cocaine as like for a pleasure center part. I think is one of the comparisons they used. Like they had a brain scan of someone who was on cocaine, and then the religion and the same exact points were lit up. And that's
similarly for the meditative state. It doesn't matter whether
I'll see if I can find that.
You have like a
private chat.
Yeah, there was a paper done a ways ago about the Christian prayer types and Islamic ones and Buddhists, and the ones that are the most meditative, they're lighting up brain systems that light up in sexual arousal. So religious ecstasy is not entirely an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Well, but fMRI is the new phrenology. I don't trust most of it. I have done some brain imaging in the past, and the thing is, it's just so exaggerated what they're reporting. It's basically looking at pixels, and these are the pixels. These pixels are the product of an awful lot of manipulation and math. That it makes it totally untrustworthy as far as I'm concerned. There's for instance, cocaine lights up everything in the brain. It just goes boom.
Can I add something to that?
Can I make a correction quick on something?
All right. So go ahead.
Where I said the hard, it was actually just drugs. It just said drugs. So I was thinking that they showed something with coke. So I actually stand corrected on that one. I found a link to one of the things that they had with it. So I'll put in the internal chat. So you kind of know what I'm referring
So,
to.
Can I quickly add something, please?
Big Coke, and you will light up interesting areas of the brain. Whether it's significant or not that's a matter of interpretation.
Yeah, I want to say that I am also very highly skeptical about this. It seems to me a lot like the twin studies. Oh, these two twins have the same cigarettes. Oh, and these brain regions light up exactly. So, but that doesn't mean there's a relationship necessarily.
Yeah, I just was like, oh, to me it was just an interesting study. Was the only reason I was mentioning it, was I thought it was interesting. So, I mean, and like I said, I put the link in the private chat so anyone can, and if you Google, religion study brain scans comparable to drugs or something along those lines, you'll get many different results on the subject. So
my question is just how many other activities result in similar brain scans? So like there could be multitude of activities that result in a brain activity that seems reminiscent of drug use, but that doesn't mean that there's some kind of correlation there. It doesn't mean there isn't, but
like one of the things that in this article that it mentions is, and this is one of the paragraphs here, it says, but among the first results to show that individual brains respond to the idea of God, providing a fascinating insight into the important role religion plays in the human mood and decision making. So I think they were more looking at like, what does religion, how does it affect your brain, and what would that then affect in looking?
Am I the only one? Am I the only one that just felt like that spoke on like the side of pro-religion? That sounded really like it was saying we need religion to function in a...
For what journal is it article from?
Well, Brony, I would say you need to be careful when trying to interpret results from a study like this. Because really this study is just trying to map out the spots in the brain that they think are correlated to religious experience, whether that's, being induced by drugs or music or whatever. You can't really extrapolate beyond that. This is the area that they're trying to correlate to it. The other things that you're saying, that would need more study to be able to make those links. What I can tell you is,
here's actually the.
I was just going to make a quick mention.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any God center of the brain. There is no single spot where we have religion, but we do have a lot of different components that add up. And then, of course, you have the social dynamic of religion institutions, because people don't normally make up their religion whole cloth. They're drawing off of traditions they've been raised in or that they're attracted to. So there's a lot of different things going on in there.
PZ, do you remember the VMAT2 that people were saying that was the God gene back a few years ago?
Yeah. And once again, you got to understand the methodology of these studies. Is that what you do is you scan somebody's brain when they're not exposed to something, and what you discover then is that everything's getting lit up all over the place. It's just one big glowing thing, and then you expose them to the treatment, which is maybe you recite the word God at them or whatever it is, and you do another scan. The brain's all lighting up all over the place, and then you subtract the first one from the second one, and you look for differences. And that means that what the results you're looking at are grossly conditioned by the prior state of the individual that's being scanned. So you don't know what the heck you're looking at.
Yeah.
The other thing is that what they're measuring.
I agree with PZ on a lot of that. That is a factor. One of the things in the.
Go ahead, Ari.
The other thing you're looking at is. Yeah. Also remember what you're looking at is with an fMRI, you're looking at oxygen consumption. So you're actually looking at the activity of capillaries in the brain. So you're got a really low level of resolution, and you're looking at an indirect measure of activity. You cannot detect, for instance, inhibitory versus excitatory stimuli using fMRI. So it's a mess.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best persons that explains or does a real very good research in neurology is V.S. Ramachandran.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And I And I'll stand corrected on that. Like I said, I just remembered the report and thought it was kind of an interesting one that I had kind of come across. So that was why I was kind of bringing it up.
It's okay that there's a huge amount of literature on this stuff right now, and it's kind of daunting because I think they tend to overinflate everything. But yeah, Ramachandran's really good because he doesn't rely on just here's my great technique where I can shuffle people through and get these numbers out. He uses multiple techniques, and that's essential because you don't know exactly what you're looking at. But using multiple techniques, you can get a lot more depth in the analysis, and I really like Ramachandran's work.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I really like Ramachandran because he and maybe it's unfortunate for these people, but he uses patients that have specific parts of their brains dysfunctional. For example, one has an amygdalin. I think it's how you pronounce it, the one region in the brain.
The amygdalin.
The amygdalin. And that person doesn't have any stress or any.
The other great thing about Ramachandran.
Yeah.
The other great thing about Ramachandran is he told me he reads my blog now and then. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me.
On that Chapters syndrome guy that couldn't recognize his father, and he figured out the dynamics of what was going on in there. No, it is an absolutely wonderful researcher.
Oh,
yeah. Can you PZ real quick? Can you put the name in the private chat so I can look it up because I'm not sure how to spell that.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
Oh, but that reminds me.
Thank
I
you, RJ.
got an interesting note on my Darwin Day video because most of the people were saying, hey, came from Pelagia's video, and someone said, everyone's talking about Pelagia. I came from the Pharyngula. And so I went to the Pharyngula, and I saw you post my video. Thanks a lot. That got me a lot of viewers. Thanks, PZ.
Yeah.
I do that every once in a while.
Yeah.
I consult other people. Also, you did a lot of the work for me, so that's why.
Well, it all started because Shannon asked me to do the video. Well, because Eric Hovind posted the question Darwin or doubting Darwin little thing, which has evidently been around for a little while.
It's been around for at least a decade. Yeah.
I did not know that. I had never seen it before, and then found out.
Whenever a creationist posts something, it's not creative or original.
It's almost like I said. I always find it funny. I it's just amazing how just almost ignorant people can be on things, and it's like what I had not run into a flat earther until about 2 or 3 years ago, and when I first heard, I'm like, okay, this guy is a troll. He's joking. Oh God, no, he's not. Yeah,
excuse me. Why you just said about people? A lot of people be ignorant. A lot of people don't think they are. That's their problem. They think they have all the answers.
Dunning-Kruger. Yeah.
Yes. Or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the right name, right?
It is, the Dunning-Kruger effects when
overinflating their sense of expertise. Yeah.
Yeah, they overassume how much knowledge they have on a topic because they don't understand the topic, and
I don't know
someone who's highly educated on a topic might underassume how educated they are on a topic.
Yeah.
Then
who was it that?
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I can't remember who it was, but who was it that said that only smart people actually realize how dumb they actually are? And I'm like,
maybe it was me. I don't know, but
you know what you don't know, and so you're daunted by all that you don't yet know.
Yeah,
I call it Socrates.
Okay.
So speaking of dumb people, PC Myers, regarding your
okay.
No.
You let off.
Let me finish.
Yes.
Regarding your last video about G-Man, have you? Yeah, Have you? Did you make that video because of my post on Twitter?
I don't know why. I got a notification somewhere that it was challenging me, but
Yeah, I made a post about that video, about G-Man video, challenging PC Myers for a debate. So, and I posted it on Skipper to PC Myers, and right the day after I posted it, you made that video. So I was like, oh wow, he actually saw my post.
I see a lot of stuff, but the thing is, I get dozens of
G-Man
these.
made a stream 17 hours ago titled PZ Myers is afraid of G-Man. He knows evolution is a joke.
That's what we were just talking about.
In that stream, well, G-Man say it's some unbelievably ridiculous stuff, but he's also done with you, PZ.
Oh, good.
He's done with you. So yeah.
So I just listened to a few minutes of it, and I heard him passing out Aaron Raw and things like that. And so
it's just
I think I joined the ranks of Aaron, so that's
you
that's
did.
a good.
You did. Yeah. So he only now wants to debate King Crocodile. He's done with you.
but Jay, somebody else is in his crosshairs now. Okay. Yeah, what a truculent guy. He's not like somebody who's an amiable nitwit like Edgar, Mr. Intelligent Design. He's just combative and annoying. And so I would think that anybody who could be in a conversation with him for more than a minute and not want to bang their head with a ball peen hammer is just missing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was me. That was
get back.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Wait,
I think it was Nestle who was saying something first. Okay, there you go.
Remember, you are talking about a guy who thinks that scissors share a common ancestor with iron.
Yeah. But like, I was just gonna ask Jay because he said something outrageous in his stream. I was like,
it's kind
of when does he not say something outrageous?
This was bad though.
Really bad,
for G-Man? Even by G-Man standards, it was bad.
Let her say it.
Yes, he said twice in his stream, he claimed that atheism that made atheists bad is they would not call out another atheist when he molested a little girl.
I didn't even know that, but like I'm pretty fucking sure
atheists would not call out another atheist if he molested a little girl.
People are going to say something.
Now, that's really not, it's ridiculous, but it's not funny because that's a
I'm sorry. It was just one of those
kind of
I'm sorry for that was just one of those. It's like
we were indeed.
So stupid.
Let me finish, please. So we were in Deidre's hangout last night. She had the Holy Spackle. She had a hangout, and Dragnot came in, and Drag actually texted G-Man while we were in the hangout and asked him what the hell he was talking about, because I'd asked on Google Plus, does anybody have any idea what he's talking about? Did somebody molest a child? And atheists didn't speak out about it, which sounds really crazy because we did in the hangout, we did bring up in the past, and atheists called each other out all the time.
You just cut out, Jade. What did you say?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so anyway, it turns out he just made it up.
Oh wow!
He said he just made that up to make a point.
What the hell? Is that just his way of deflecting from the Catholic priest pedophiles?
Probably.
Yeah.
No. It has nothing to do with that. He just made it up because his answer didn't make much sense, but it had something to do with trying to point out something about PZ and atheists bad, countering what atheists say. So he just reached for the most horrible thing he could think of and said it.
Yeah.
But you were just involved with that just a bit ago with that guy accusing you of being soft on Islam. He was an atheist, and I drew it because it was a false rap.
Yeah, I know, and it's like they don't understand my reputation at all. I'm the guy who has the reputation of calling everyone out for any offense. So I would tell him that he ought to just go look up Michael Shermer and let's see who else, Brian Dunning. They're not pedophiles, but they have done horrible things. And yes, you will find lots of examples of atheists covering up for them, but you'll also find lots of examples of atheists calling them out.
No, exactly. I think lately there are more atheists complaining about PZ Myers than there are creationists.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
That might be
It's also,
true.
But
it's also kind of equating atheists to a religion of sorts, because okay, so some atheist has done something bad, therefore it's kind of like an association argument.
Yeah, except
Yeah.
well, and at the end, let me just finish. At the end of near the end of what he was saying, he asked people in the audience to please find him proof that the shooter in Florida was an atheist, because clearly that shooter must have been an atheist.
oh god.
What, the shooter in Florida just gone?
Yeah.
Yes,
But
the
like,
one that just happened.
oh
The
my
death of those
God.
17
It's just
people.
disgusting. You can't
Yeah.
use a tragic event like a school shooting to.
Because in anti, I was going to say this on your thing about where with the religion and him and how he thinks. He is one of the ones who he's trying, and like I would argue most creationists try on this, is to put atheism as a religion, so that way when one atheist does something bad or wrong or
Right.
whatever, they can go, aha, look, it's a religion, and this is what their religion teaches and promotes. And ha, we got you, atheists, you're evil. And yet the thing is, when someone who does something like that, who's a Christian, and you point out that, hey, a Christian did this, and here's where in the Bible they could get that justification, and you point to where it is, they go, oh, well, they weren't a true Christian, and they pull out the whole no truth gospel and special pleading fallacies, and it's laughable almost, and it I mean, not in a good way, but just like, oh my God, are you kidding me way?
It's just a lot of the guilt by association. Since I've been making YouTube videos, I point out quite often in my videos that a lot of atrocities happen in the name of a faith, any given faith, whatever faith you want to attribute. And then they turn around and use like Joseph Stalin, and they're like, oh, but he was an atheist, and that means atheists are bad. And it's like, I don't understand it in the same way that I don't call Christians bad because people have done things bad in the name of Christ. How can
I mention someone that?
Have you guys seen
someone that people forget? I just want to mention someone that people forget when you're talking about atrocities. There's one horrible human being that did the things he did in the name of Christianity, and that was King Leopold of Belgium.
There's
People
been
forget about
many.
him.
There's been many atrocities in the name of many different religions.
Dude, I'm not going to think many people know King Leopold.
Guys, we're all talking over each other again.
Yeah.
I think it was Jade. You were talking about King Leopold.
Yes, King Leopold of, some of you may have heard the term Belgian Congo. It hasn't been used in many years, but King Leopold took over the Congo, and the atrocities there were horrific.
Yeah.
You can look it up if you'd like, but yeah, it said, of course, he did it because he was going to Christianize the nation. But the reality is, most of for all the talk of Christianizing nations during the age of colonialism, it was really about power. One group trying to get power over the other. It was the infighting in Europe was transferred to the rest of the world. But I want to say one last thing about G-Man last night. PZ will be happy to know that there is more evidence for a flat Earth than there is for evolution.
There to that flat Earthism. Now the G-Man says it.
Oh,
yeah, well, now G-Man says he's not a flat Earther. He's not a flat Earther, but he's going to investigate it. But he knows that there is more evidence for the flat Earth. I love that one.
You already jumped on the moon landing hoax thing.
Yeah,
I'm getting a headache.
I have a question for you. When is your brain coming back from when it just ran away? I think his brain just ran.
This is what happens when you're in the basement of the online. We're seeing the equivalent of the guy who would be at the park on the soapbox screaming about some weird conspiracy and handing out little mimeograph sheets in the old days. But now they've all got YouTube channels.
Yes.
So now you instantly see them, and you see them everywhere on the planet. So you get the false impression that there's suddenly a mass of new flat earthers. No, we're just self-identifying them now. And it's a shock. In the same way when they found out the level of certain diseases and things that had been underreported. But now, you know, you can try to figure out, okay, who's the serious problems and who aren't.
I gotta say, on the atrocities thing, have you guys seen I know it's an old video now, but have you guys seen the video of Neff where he's talking about the biblical passage where the 42 kids are slain by the 2 female bears?
Oh God, yes.
I might have.
No, I didn't. What
I saw it recently because since my talk with True Empiricism, I've gotten a lot of older videos from like 2009, 2010, and my recommendeds, and so so it was interesting to say the very least.
Yeah, but it doesn't beat sex with flying demon snakes.
Or the ATP synthase evolved from a bird beak. See,
well, so in relation to flat Earth, do you think it's our fault as a informed society or intellectual group of people that people actually believe in these things? Because personally, I think a lot of it comes down to lack of education or lack of understanding in a topic, and a conspiracy is much easier to understand than science. So what do you think? Do you think that's
I think it's that, and also the internet makes stupid stuff spread more easily.
Yeah. It's
yeah, and you got confirmation bias with the internet as well. So like if you believe in flat Earth, you can find lots of people that agree with you. So
exactly.
It's more normal.
Well, I'm gonna blame another source though too, and that is that the media enables this because currently the media does this crap where it's just he said, she said, and it's you just report these 2 positions straight across as if they have equal value.
Yeah.
And another thing I would blame is, and this is going to annoy some people, is the debating idea. That too often we say, well, if you're in disagreement, we should just have a debate, put both sides on an equal platform, and let them yell at each other for an hour.
You're talking about exposing ideas, right? Like putting these ideas forward. Is that
but
giving them a stage, so to speak.
Yes. Too often we couple these
ideas.
Guys,
Some ideas don't.
No, not altogether. Sorry.
Yes, some ideas don't.
Go ahead.
Okay.
And
so I was going to say some ideas don't deserve a stage.
No,
True.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so my point to that, PZ, is that although I understand how you mean that, is that I feel like we should give people a platform to spew their stupidness, and we should be well equipped to combat that stupidness with information people will understand. So that we're not taking a level of authority, an intellectual level of authority, and that people can understand these things. And I feel like if we don't debate these things, and I know most debates are not useful, they don't help the discussion, but if we don't debate these things, we just kind of close the conversation off, and then confirmation bias plays more of a role because people just listen to the people they agree with.
Well, let me argue against that though, because the thing is that these people all have a platform already. And there's no restriction on G-Man, for instance, getting on YouTube and saying whatever he wants. But the thing is that too often we think we need to give them the acknowledgement that their ideas are worth discussing. Why giving them a platform? So, for instance, G-Man ought not to be debated. We ought to be able to just, on our own, put up a video, for instance, or a talk or whatever, and shoot down the nonsense he's saying. I'm not saying we should ignore what he says.
Yeah.
I'm saying that we should not give him an equal platform.
Yeah, I
The
kind
debate, the debate
Thank
challenge.
you for clarifying. That's a good.
Yeah.
I think that's a good stance
Yeah.
because that essentially does the same thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
because
The debate challenge.
Oh,
The
go ahead.
the debate challenge is perhaps the best weapon that these people have, because once they challenge someone like PZ and it's accepted, if no PZ wouldn't do that, but let's say it's accepted, PZ gives them credibility that they don't deserve, and if PZ Myers rejects it, then they can go all about like saying, oh, they are too scared to debate me and all that shit. It's a win-win. It's a win-win situation for them.
So maybe this is my own bias, but don't
Yeah.
you think that PZ would just show the clear foolishness in their points?
Yes,
I
but I
think-
can do
I
that
think-
without
I think
doing a
it-
debate.
Sorry,
Yeah.
go on, PZ.
I can do that without dignifying G-Man debate.
Yeah.
Well, and can I add?
Oh, go ahead, Jade.
Part of the problem is the way they quote unquote debate. Now, I actually put up a list of conditions because people were saying, "Oh, Jade, you won't debate us on evolution." So I put up a list of conditions which are quite reasonable. You know, there's nothing outrageous. Anybody wants my list, I'll be happy to give it to you. But basically, my list was to have a reasoned debate, including things like you have to present an outline of what you're going to talk about beforehand, so nobody's blindsided, because I wouldn't allow that. But that's what happens in these sorts of things. For example, Nephilim Free once challenged someone to show him the evolution of the mouth parts of a locust. Well, it took me about 15 seconds to find a really good reference for the evolution of the mouth parts of arthropods. Going to a locust is a little too exactly. But
Yeah.
who on earth, in the middle of a discussion,
Would know
has
that.
at their fingertips the evolution of the mouth parts of locusts or arthropods?
Well, I do.
So, well, you might, but and it, like I said, it took me like 15 seconds to find one. But you find yourself blindsided by things like this that you can't respond to, and then you get people like Kent Hovind, who talks about the lies in the textbooks. And I think a couple of people here know that I actually went out and bought every single one of those textbooks he refers to.
I have one of the textbooks that he was talking about, and because he says the stupid Haeckel's embryos argument. I said, actually, they just take micrograph photos. Here's was it Pearson 9th edition, something like that?
Yeah, I have
biology. It's like, actually,
I have
Yeah,
I have every single book that he refers to, because he put up slides with the names of the books on them, and I copied them down, and I went to Amazon and I got them for very little, because they're old books. They're from the 1980s, most of them.
Mhm.
And there's one book I'm missing, because that particular edition, there was only one book available. It was an outrageous amount of money, so it was like maybe it was edition number 8 or something. So I bought edition 7 and 9. I got them on the ones on either side. But the thing is, so I looked through all the textbooks, and he's lying about the textbooks.
Well,
Yeah,
think
and you
some
know
people
that
here-
because you're doing source methods. That's the
Right,
key. That is the Achilles heel for all wooists. They can't play that game. So
No,
if media and others force them to play that game, that helps defuse them.
And Neffy used to bring up this supposed bacteriologist, Niels Herbert Nielsen, who did experiments with bacteria for 40 years or 30 years, I forget exactly, and found no change. So what happened? Well, it took me years actually to get the books. It's 2 books that
Lenski
Herbert
experiment.
Nielsen wrote, and I know this is well. First of all, I was suspicious because Niels Herbert Nielsen was a very good researcher, and as I understand it, a very good professor at Lund, Sweden. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that, Lund, Sweden. And the thing is, he is a botanist who mostly wrote about
Person,
Salem.
isn't a botanist someone that deals with plants?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So what
he
the hell
mostly-
is he doing stuff on bacteria?
He mostly wrote about Onotheria and Salix, which Salix is willow. Onotheria is this flower you see around a lot.
Okay,
And
thank
so
you.
I couldn't see anything he wrote about wrote about bacteria. So I found the book, I found the reference from various creationist sites, and it took me years, but I finally was able to buy the books from Germany, which isn't surprising because the other thing I found was interesting, that all of Niels Herbert Nielsen's papers were in German. So I was kind of wondering how people, and
Got
when
an
I got
English
the
quote.
books,
Yeah.
the books were mostly in German, but it turns out this particular section of the books was in English. And like Conservapedia and all these other places, fortunately, gave me the page numbers.
Nice.
No, for God's sake, I have it. I've actually copied it down. Anybody wants it, I'll send you a copy of what I've typed out.
Oh, please send that to me. I want to have that.
I will. I will. I'll write that down right now. What happened is Dr. Nielsen created a hybrid of willow, Salix willow, and using various different species of willow. So he created this hybrid, and he spent years creating this hybrid, and the hybrid grew great in the greenhouse. But then when he took it outside, he tried to take it outside, it failed, and so this particular hybrid failed. That's what he's talking about. Has nothing to do with bacteria whatsoever.
Yeah.
And his so-called experiment that failed is nothing at all what they're saying it is. But they know that most people are not going to find this obscure book. And by the way, Dr. Nielsen is although he was apparently an excellent researcher as a botanist, and as far as I could tell, an excellent teacher, he was a bit of an eccentric. The book, by the way, came out the same year, either the same year or the year before Watson and Crick published on the shape of DNA. It gives you an idea how old this book is.
Yeah.
Can I just,
Can
I ask?
Apparently, Dr. Nielsen, just one thing, please. Dr. Nielsen apparently had his own theory of evolution, where life on Earth a number of times completely died, and then abiogenesis happened several times. So he's a bit of a crank.
So can I ask a question, Jade? How did the hybridization, I don't know the word for it, how did that occur? Did they do it by breeding?
Yes, he did it by breeding
together? Or did they do it in a genetic fancy form?
No.
Yeah.
No, this is a research he did like in the 1930s and 40s and whatever. And so he did it by breeding the old-fashioned way.
We've been doing that forever though, since nearly the beginning of agriculture.
I know. And it was just an experiment he did. He bred like 4 or 5 different kinds of willow. He crossed 4 or 5 different kinds of willows, and he did this experiment. And but even he says this particular one failed. It's not like it was a evolutionary failure, for goodness sakes. It's just
that's
what Jade has done here. She's done a magnificent measurement of anti-evolution scholarship, because it's impossible for anybody to accurately quote his experiment and make the claim they do, because they must have got it from a quote mine. So they never have looked at the original material. So everybody who quotes him on that point has siphoned it off of a creationist quote mine. Every one of them.
Jade is special. So, Jade is special. So, it's, obviously she would do the research.
Yeah. And I was gonna... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to give you one other quick example. There was a link that is in a number of creationist sites about how this is a little bit different. This has more to do with climate change, about tree ring dating doesn't work. And they were citing a government publication from the 1960s, mid-1960s. Well, I was able to find that, and I own it.
Oh, I want
because
that
I do
one too,
that.
Jade.
I have. Okay,
Give
I'll
me a
get you
copy
that
of
one too.
that.
I'll write that down. As people know me, I own a lot of the material that they quote. So the original material, so I know, including a symposium in 1967 on mathematics that they also use. I'll write that one down.
Oh, the Wistar thing?
No, it's not Wistar. It's something else altogether. It happened here in California. Wow. And I've got the book, and it's completely misrepresented again. So they're talking about how tree rings don't work because they're citing this book. The book was fantastic. It's a government publication. And it's very interesting. I learned a lot from the book. Well, it turns out what the book is talking about is something called lensing in trees. What happens if a tree grows by the vascular cambium, right, which is right underneath the bark. And if that vascular cambium gets damaged, the tree may have a little, like a semi-ring, like a lens. That's called a lens. So it's lensing. So occasionally that happens. In this book, there's lots of illustrations of lensing. But the book also talked about how they actually do tree ring studies. And they don't take one sample from a tree, they take more than one sample from a tree. And they also don't take one sample from one tree in one area. So to do tree ring studies, they take multiple samples from an area and more than one sample per tree. So if there is lensing, they're going to probably notice it. There is lensing. If you're looking at, even if you're looking at 50 years, what on earth does 1 year mean?
Yeah.
Seriously, that's what it's going to be.
But
that's
I've noticed a lot since speaking to people that know a lot about these topics on YouTube, that a lot of these creationists or people that try to discredit valid science seem to quote mine all of the time, and it gives slight credibility to what they're saying if someone doesn't actually look into it and do what you do, Jade, and buy the publications they talk about. So that's something everyone should keep aware of, is quote mining.
In fact, use it as a springboard. If you follow up on the source and try to track it down, you'll be able to measure their scholarship that way. And by the way, I got a literal number for it. Out of over 2,300 anti-evolutionists, 95% of them do not cite primary sources at all. They're simply copying somebody else's stuff.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've noticed, if you really, really want to make a creationist mad, I found the perfect way to do it. When they cite something, find the original source and go, no, here's what it actually says, and just list. It's, you know, basically give them all the information, all the primary sources, and just wall them that way.
Oh, I tried.
They can't argue that. You get blocked, don't you?
Oh well, they will go like
if you do it with true empiricism, for instance, he calls you citation bluffing.
Yeah, exactly.
How dare we?
Talking about the. We'll see. He was talking about the bacterial flagellum, and so I had a paper on hand because I had just done a video about it. So I pulled up the paper to show it to him, and he said, "Oh, you're citation bluffing." I said, "Read it. Read the paper. Show it to the audience. Read it. Have everyone read it."
What does citation bluffing mean? And you made a video on that flagellum thing, didn't you, Jackson?
Yes,
I did. Yeah, because so I had to learn what citation bluffing was because I had not heard this term.
Yeah,
but citation bluffing is evidently when you claim a source says something, but your source doesn't actually say that thing that you claim it says.
So isn't that quite
projection?
Yeah, projection. Exactly. The creationists do that all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
It's to pulling a Garrett Hardin.
I wanted to mention something relevant to what PZ just pointed out, one of his Ferengula papers on, textbooks and Haeckel. One of the things I wanted to point out, because I noticed he's talking about Jonathan Wells here. One of the things creationists do, and look out for this, and Jonathan Wells does the same thing. In Jonathan Wells' book, he talks about Haeckel's embryos, and he shows the picture, which are allegedly of Haeckel's embryos. They aren't.
No.
That picture was not drawn by Haeckel. It was drawn by Romer. Romer wrote his own book, and he copied Haeckel's embryos, but his copies are much cruder than Haeckel's original embryos. Also, by the way, they always use the embryos from Haeckel's first book. He got a lot of criticism, so he later redrew them for subsequent books.
Wells
they never show those.
Terrible scholar.
So Wells and many other creationist sites, because I spent some time tracking this down once, they prefer to use Romer's crude copies of Haeckel's embryos and say, look how bad these strongs are. They don't look anything like the embryos. Well, they aren't even Haeckel's, they're Romer's.
Yeah.
That's how bad creationists are.
And the thing that I always find funny there, whenever they do that, is they act like the drawings are what we're basing our observations on. No, we've seen these things. We know what they look like. It's just, I always just find it so dishonest. And it's like, how can people be this dishonest? And it's always baffled me.
a lot of them literally don't know the difference between a primary and a secondary source. So they read Jonathan Wells's Icons of Evolution, and it says what they want to be true, and they copy it, and they're feeling they're very diligent by copying the source accurately. They can be very, very good at that. There was a guy that threw a Dembski and Wells posting from Evolution News and Views. He's an Islamic creationist, which is hilarious, seeing him cover from Evolution News, which is your Christian anti-evolutionism. But he was so diligent in copying down the quote that I was able to Google search the text, and that's how I found what Evolution News article he had cribbed it from.
And also, I'll do add to something to the Haeckel's embryos. And I don't think they were frauds, because if you see like drawings about the heart diagram in textbooks, they are often simplified to the extent of almost absurdity, because it's really simple, like just two or four chambers and with different colors.
Yeah,
that's simple.
There's been several recent works that have gone on about how Haeckel is actually a very meticulous illustrator when you look at his original work, and he's just gobsmackingly detailed, as opposed to the guy that copies it badly.
And I would like to point out that that was his response when people were criticizing his first drawings, and he pointed out that these are just diagrams like regular other diagrams. But then he went ahead and redrew them. The other thing I'd like to point out that some creationists try to bring up is that he was accused of fraud and convicted by a court in Jena or whatever. Didn't happen. The case they're talking about was where he said some things about a former. I've actually have all the information. I kind of have to remember it vaguely, but a former colleague, he thought a former colleague dissed him in modern terminology. So he said some nasty things about the colleague said some nasty things about them. They sued each other for slander and both won. Although Haeckel got Haeckel's sort of lost because the fine he had to pay was slightly larger than the fine the other guy had to pay. But this whole thing comes from the fact that Haeckel upset a group of Catholic professors, or a Catholic group at the time. Again, it's apologies for being kind of loose.
He had a vitriolic and rapier wit. He once described God as a gaseous vertebrate, and I've always rather liked that phrase.
But I said, excuse me for being somewhat vague, because I don't have that all memorized. I have all the information, but I don't have it memorized. But no, he was never sued for fraud. There was just a tiff between a couple guys, and it was slander, and that's all.
Creationists make really bad historians.
One of the things that. Oh, go ahead, Jackson.
Oh no, you go ahead.
No.
Okay, what I was going to say was, what I always find funny is when you do cite primary sources of that, and you do point out where they're wrong. I have gotten people to do this, and I usually end up after you get yaks who you prove are wrong, and they still want to hold on to that truth. I usually end up either getting blocked, or I get some form of something from like AIG or ICR or Discovery, something like that, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
My favorite point, because I was going to say, my favorite thing that I love is when they go, well, evolution could never be proven in a court of law. And I love when they argue that, because it has. And won.
Well, not
That's
exactly.
The funny part.
So what was he going to say, Jackson?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. It
wasn't
one in that aspect of
what? What was he going to say, Jackson?
What was I going to say?
Yeah.
I think Jade was going to say something.
Oh, yeah. I think Jade was saying something.
Well, I was just going to say, if you're talking about the Dover trial, no, it wasn't proven.
Well,
it was more like intelligent design was proven to was unconstitutional rather than evolution was proven.
Actually, he was asked.
Not even
Jones
that.
was asked.
Let Jade finish.
Let me finish. What happened is that when creationism is disguised as intelligent design, that is against the law to teach. Now, no ruling has ever been made on intelligent design that is not disguised creationism. But we all know that intelligent design is always disguised creationism.
Jones was explicitly asked by both parties plaintiffs and defendants to rule on whether intelligent design was legitimate science. And they were coming in, the intelligent design gang was just sure they had a really great case for it that began to disintegrate immediately. And so Jones ruled based on what they had asked him to do. And he said, based on what I've seen here, no, it isn't science. It's terrible. It's just thinly disguised religion. And boy, then the intelligent design gang, Casey Luskin and all the rest, just went ballistic on him ever since. They were dumping on him constantly.
So am I just naive in thinking there's some kind of way of actually reasoning with these people? Because I personally think like everyone has a way of getting through to them, but maybe I'm just naive in that.
Well, so what I was going to say, well, what I was going to point out was that I bet all of you have probably heard the claim that the average dinosaur size that got on the ark was that of a sheep. You guys have heard that claim, right?
Sheep or small horse.
Okay, so I had RJ look that claim up. He tracked it down to its original source, and the place where they got that claim was, I kid you not, Michael Crichton's The Lost World, which is the sequel to Jurassic Park.
Yeah, it was a novel.
God. Shut the fuck up.
Wait, so...
And they even cited it. They even cited it as such. That this
They still cite it in the 2015 article.
As though it were a science source.
Hey,
Well,
RJ,
fictional Jurassic World is just as valid as the Bible, though. Come on.
yeah.
Okay, can I ask something? Did they cite a scene, or did they cite an expert who helped make the movie?
No, they literally cited the book.
Yeah, the whole book.
The novel.
Yeah, the whole thing.
And no specific page number, just the book itself. It was that superficial. And then
What the
Cypher
fuck?
Quoted it.
Oh
then
my god, I just can't believe a creator cited Jurassic Park.
Oh, guys.
Jade learned.
So you were saying, RJ?
Oh, that was just the thing. Is that they you had once you get the little seed corn planted of something they want to be true, then the parasitical scholarship angle fits in, because the vast majority of them are parasites. Kent Hovind is a parasitical scholar. Ray Comfort is a parasitical scholar. Almost all the point people that you see in creation science are not fact claimants; they are copyists. Over in intelligent design, it's very different. Most of the people who are point people at the Discovery Institute are their fact claimants. So Jonathan Wells's and Bill Dembski's and all the rest. So it's a different demographic. But in creationism land, parasitism is just rampant.
Yeah.
Jade, your camera is on, I think. Jade?
Huh?
Jade is a black spot, a gray spot.
But it's got. I've got a Band-Aid over it. So
yeah, I thought so. Yes.
But
yeah,
We
okay,
like to see the little kitty.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kitty's still pissed off. I meant to change in February, but I didn't.
But I miss Darth Freddy though.
Okay, I'll bring back Darth.
But it doesn't matter. But this is also hilarious. This one.
But yeah, it was just that I think the greatest thing about fact checking creationism is that it will always, what they pull up will always be better than the actual information. It's just so much funnier than what it would have.
I learned it took me years to get the gist of it, but I discovered you really want to see how bad Dwayne Gish is a scholar. Fact check him. Whenever he brings up a technical source, I really want to read that source, because I'm literally betting every single time that he is manipulating and misrepresenting it, and every single time that turns out to be the case. That becomes a pattern.
Wait, RJ, are you saying that Dwayne Gish, the founder of Gish Galloping, is dishonest?
Oh, shucks, say it, stop. Yeah, he is the most manipulative scholar I have ever seen in my life. I have to admire him in air quotes. He's dead now. I think he died about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little longer. But anyway, I have to admire his skill. I've never seen anybody in the entire field who could ferret through material and scavenge just the tiny little bit that, if you looked at it from just the right angle, would support his argument. And he ignores absolutely everything else. But that's the problem, is he ignores everything else. So when he brings up a source, I mentioned it, Jackson and Cap, you got my slam dunk. The thing where he had to have known about the content of this 1975 Allen work that he doesn't discuss in his 95 book, but he knew about it in the 93 book that he wrote. And therefore, having his primary source arguments, his books, and that you can trace what was under his eyeballs or not. And so you can directly accuse him of misrepresentation of sources because you know the originals.
Yeah, and
also, someone in the live chat says pterodactyls. It's pterosaurs. Sorry. Sorry.
Well, pterodactylus is just one of the early found species of it, but you know, it's pteranodon and all that. You know, they pop up in the dinosaurs.
I just get triggered when someone uses it as such.
I think it's really interesting that pterodactyl was one of the species used by Cuvier to figure out that extinction was a real thing.
Yeah. Well, they were that period in the late 18th and early 19th century was just a time in foment, because they came from a worldview that didn't know much. They knew about maybe 1,000 different species, and a lot of those would have been familiar to Bible folks. So it was a very insular world. And then they started sending out all of these colonial expeditions. Yeah, my tongue is tangling up. I'm cold here. Anyway, they would find, in addition to oppressing the natives, they would find all of these specimens because they were all on a science groupie binge. So they would send stuff back. Napoleon was a big science groupie. That's one of the things why they were doing down in Egypt and all the rest. And suddenly they went from 1,000 species to 10,000 to 100,000 and everything. There's just tons. And so Darwin was just part of that process of where suddenly the data field was expanding like mad. They were finding more and more fossils of animals that were unlike. They had to come up with dinosaur as a new term to describe stuff. And it took half a century or more to kind of filter through and figure out how all of that came together. And the net result was creationism was just as dead as a doornail by the 1880s, whereas the only game in town was evolution.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, RJ, but wasn't it Gish who did the whole fire-breathing dinosaur?
Oh gosh, yes, I got a whole section on it in Dynamania at TIP. He was literally arguing that Parasaurolophus, which is the one with the really long head crest, was a fire-breathing dragon, and he was using this as a stage prop to lead into Bombardier beetle, which is one of the classic misrepresentations of creationism. And I covered all of that. But the problem is the skull he put up, which is a not inaccurate, lightly drawn, but still anatomically fairly accurate skull of Parasaurolophus. If you thought about it, the argument that it could be a fire breather was physically impossible, no matter how you tried to locate where it might be making a flame. It was going to incinerate its innards or do something that was preposterous one way or the other. And so as an anonymous, Dwayne Gish showed that he was definitely not a particle physicist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, RJ. Okay, can I say something quick? Before I forget. You all know the passage in the Bible where it speaks of this fire or fiery breathing Leviathan or something. Was it the Leviathan, Jade, or something else?
Oh, well, Leviathan, I think, is a badly referenced... Oh, Jade, go ahead, Jade.
I just want to confirm something. Is the Leviathan described as a fiery breathing thing or something else?
No, I don't think it's Leviathan. I think it's something else.
That doesn't matter.
Leviathan, if I remember correctly, was the beast of the seas, but that's Old Testament, and I'm pretty fuzzy.
It has sort of smoke that it emits.
Before I forget, it's very important. Something in the Bible, it says a fiery breath. And I think, it's my personal hypothesis, I think it's trying to describe the hissing sound of reptiles. Like...
It's possible.
Could be,
I'll look it up in Bible Gateway and see if I can find it.
So can I just, sorry to interrupt, Jade, what is a Leviathan? Sorry if I said that wrong.
Monster.
Nobody knows. It's just a gigantic beast.
It's probably a saltwater crocodile.
Behemoth. I think you're thinking of Behemoth. There are these two questionable creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan, mentioned in the Bible, and nobody knows what they actually refer to.
In one book,
or if they refer to anything
it's
real.
in the same book.
Yeah, as far as I understood, Leviathan was supposed to be like a giant sea serpent.
Yeah,
I think it may be a very muddled account of a whale, because if you think about the spewing that whales can come out, none of the Bible people came from places that were seafarers, so they weren't really connecting it. Behemoth, I'm absolutely certain, was a hippopotamus. It fits the bill perfectly.
So, but there's a lot of people that claim because we found the giant sea squid that means a lot of it. But the giant squid, sea squid, is nothing really alike the depictions of it. Like you see a famous painting with a kraken swallowing a fucking sea ship, and the giant squid is nothing like that. It's just colossal compared to others.
Well, cryptozoologists in particular are all about that. The aspect of, well, there's so much of the ocean that we haven't explored yet. What gigantic prehistoric or whatever creatures could still be down there? And in a lot of cases, it's like, no, these guys aren't still around. We would have probably found a population of them at this point.
So you don't think that's a valid statement? Because I personally, but I'm a moron, do make that statement all the time that the ocean is 97% or whatever the statistic is undiscovered. So there could be God knows what down there. Is that an irrational statement to make?
One thing,
guys.
So sorry.
Okay, Nestle, go ahead.
I was about to say one thing I'm hoping they can find is an extinct Ediacaran creature in the deep sea, for example.
Good luck
maybe,
with that.
Maybe too optimistic, but
it
would be.
I love it too.
Yeah, it would be exciting to see.
Developmental biologists and geneticists would have a field day if they ever found any Ediacara biota, because it's a huge issue. Do they have homeobox genes and all that? So I'm rooting for it too, even though I'm not holding my breath.
No,
I'm also going to say something.
But also, I do not know what you're referring to when you say that word. Sorry.
Ediacaran fauna was a group of organisms prior to the Cambrian, so over 540 million years ago.
I'm so sorry.
600, 700 million years.
Can you dumb it down a little bit more for a simple person? What is the Cambrius?
So
can I wing it?
Okay, RT, go ahead.
Yeah, if the Cambrian was about 500 million years ago, and previous to that, in the Precambrian period that stretches back for hundreds of millions of years, it turns out that there were some really fascinating little things which may or may not have been animals. A lot of them are just called biota. They look kind of like floor mats and strange frond-like creatures. They're structured in a way very different from any living organism, and that's why there's still such a puzzlement today. And some of the things that were alive in this Ediacaran period, which is named for a deposit down in Australia, the Ediacara Hills, where they first found them, but they found them all over the place now, especially up in Russia and other areas. That they're marine organisms. They're living in a fairly deep water environment. Oh, bravo! You got some pictures up. The one in the middle that looks like the floor mat is Dickinsonia. Yes. It may have been able to move. Carnia, I think, are the blue thingies that are sticking up there, and those things, their structure, the way they form, the problem is there are none of these super duper preservation deposits, a Lagerstätten for the Cambrian, the Precambrian. So we've only got kind of soft impressions of them, and that makes it much harder to figure out what they are. But the impression is, if they're coming from the same branches of metazoans that eventually produced the big Cambrian explosion with a ton of arthropods, they may have had homeobox genes. And so they're just starting to figure out those are the developmental genes.
Homeobox genes.
Yeah, the HOXs. Those things determine up, down, front, back. They're the basic body plan variants, and all of the various metazoans make use of them in varying combinations, which is why we look different than a bug, even though we're using the same substrate genes. And so it's still an unsettled question whether the Ediacara biota could have been formed by homeobox genes or whether they might have been a siding, and we don't have enough data field to be able to pull it out, but they're just starting to do the work on that literally in the last few years.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, James. So, Jackson, do you think it's irrational to make the statement that the ocean is so undiscovered that there could be anything down there?
Anything? I would have to.
Obviously, anything within limits. I'm not saying God's hiding at the bottom of Mariana Trench, but anything within limits.
Well, and this is why I want to get back to Jade in a moment, because I know she had something to add to this also. But
Me too.
as for a lot of I know there's lots of prehistoric fauna that people tend to believe are still down there. Like there was a Animal X or something like that, which was some kind of weird creature. There was like a glacier or something like that that broke or something, and it created this weird noise that was caught by like a submarine or something like that. And so
Are you
people
talking about the bloop?
The big blue, yeah.
yeah, that's right. So yeah, you know, I don't think that is some gigantic sea creature. I don't think there are like populations of plesiosaurs still down there in Loch Ness or any other places around the globe. I think. I mean, there are probably.
So do you think
in the
that's
places
even a possibility?
Well, in the places we haven't discovered, I bet there are some, echinoderms we haven't seen yet. Some different annelids, probably.
A lot of arthropods and stuff, and particularly bacteria and symbiont structures, various funky little worms that you find. Those I would expect to constantly see, potentially even new phyla show up. But higher up on the taxonomical level, some extinct mosasaurs flipping around, theoretically possible, but very unlikely.
So theoretically possible. You don't. So it's still technically possible for there to be a massive creature that we haven't discovered.
Sure.
Because part of me is thinking, well, we have a lot of equipment that can detect sound, and sound travels through water better than light, and that's why a lot of water animals use sound as a primary navigating system. So my thought is that probably not likely that there's a massive sea creature, because it would probably be using sound and we haven't picked it up. But then another part of my brain also says, but the ocean is so vast and so unexplored that is it still plausible that there could be some supermassive creature that we haven't discovered as of yet?
I mean,
what do you think,
Jade? But I'll toss over to Jade.
Okay, probably not. And the reason I say that is because the parts of the ocean that are largely unexplored are the very deep ocean, and the pressures are huge down there.
Yes.
And so for an animal to be very large, it would have to equalize that pressure. And that physically is pretty difficult.
And also it needs to eat a lot, and below is not much food there. So yeah.
Right. And what I was going to say is, if you want to see some deep sea creatures, follow the Monterey Bay Aquarium. The MBARI.
That's a very good point. I think it's a very good point that you've made, that the size wouldn't really make sense in the environment.
Yeah, and although you
Monterey Bay Aquarium has guys, let me finish.
Yeah, sorry.
So I was going to say, some of you may know. I live near the Monterey Bay right here, and some of you know we have deep ocean trenches out here. So the Monterey Bay Aquarium has submersibles that go down, and they take video of the strange creatures that they are finding at the bottom of the ocean. And this is a very deep bay out here, and then it has the trenches as well. And it's absolutely fascinating to see the new kinds of creatures they're constantly discovering. But they're mostly soft-bodied, and there's a really interesting, cute little squid down there. They're mostly soft-bodied, and there isn't a lot of it's very desert-like down there, because there isn't a lot of food, most of which comes filtered down. So. And this isn't even the deepest part of the ocean. When you think of other parts of the ocean, when you're getting to the even deeper sea trenches, like the Marianas Trench, no, it's very unlikely, because there's a lack of food, and part of the reason is, of course, there's a lack of sunlight. The pressure is very, very intense. But we are constantly discovering new species down there, and as RJ said, it would hardly be surprising to find a new phyla down there. But they're mostly pretty small.
Why that stuff is so fascinating is that those the big vertebrates are actually, in some respects, they would be big stars, but they're relatively uninteresting because they're vertebrates. So they're branching off theoretically from other forms. Although, as far as I can tell from my reading, none of the big Mesozoic marine reptiles, even though they got as big whales, they didn't echolocate. So that's not a feature. That's a specialization that you find with the cetaceans much, much later. But from a genetic point of view, these weird little critters that they find that may be microscopic in size are actually far more interesting for phylogenetics. Just like the choanoflagellates that Jackson knows about and all the rest, are ones that are much more impressive, because they're showing the deep roots of genetic switching that are way more interesting than what happens later on with the vertebrates.
Oh yeah, we
Again,
have the.
I want to say
archaeans of-
something about the
Go ahead,
Ediacarans. Sorry, but one thing I'm afraid of about these mysterious organisms from the Ediacaran is that they might not be even animals. Like so there are some that we have identified, like jellyfish and I think sponges, and also a thing called Kimberella, which is probably probably at least a protostome and probably even a stem mollusk. But most of these are entirely a mystery, and I am afraid that some of these are independent jumps towards multicellularity.
Yeah, well, I agree completely. And that's actually much more interesting because they dominated their niche for tens of millions of years, and then had a mass extinction, and then what was left over eventually became the stuff in the Cambrian.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't finished yet. Sorry. I think it's like imagine. You have like all these different types of fungi, right? Like the multicellular fungi. And imagine we only knew these of the fossil record, and we only have things like yeast, single-celled fungi left. Perhaps it's like this. These are like the different type of multicellular organisms that they have only single-celled relatives alive today. Perhaps.
Yeah.
And that's why it'd be fun.
Yeah.
If any of them have survived, any paleontologist and geneticist would sell their grandmother to see them.
Yeah, and that's why I hope some of them would be alive today, because I don't think this mystery can be solved by fossils alone. Only genetics can.
Wait, Nestle,
I wanted
go ahead,
I just wanted to point out quickly. I put a couple of links in the inside chat here, and one is to MBARI, and this is the Monterey Bay Research Institute. And if you want to see the stuff that's at the bottom of our ocean out here, go there, because there's some great videos of some really interesting little creatures that are down there.
Thank you. I'm going to put that in the actual YouTube video chat. That's really interesting. There's so many, they are essentially alien to us, really, aren't they?
Yes, yes. They're a delicious puzzle, and scientists love puzzles.
Sorry, Jade, what was you saying?
I was just going to say, well, and sometimes you get the commentary from the people who are in the submersible, which is really fun. Yeah, but the other thing is, this is the link is to a series of illustrations of animals from the Ediacaran by an artist on DeviantArt. Now, this is a particularly good artist. I have actually gone and looked up most of the animals because I wanted to see how accurate this guy was. So I actually went and looked up most of the animals or creatures from the Ediacaran that he has drawn. I looked them up on the original papers that showed pictures and x-rays and so on and so forth of the actual creatures from the Ediacaran. So in my opinion, these are really good, really accurate portrayals of Ediacaran fauna.
I couldn't actually send the links to everyone else because Jackson has the links blocked. But if someone wants to tweet it, I can. Okay. We can share that with everyone else.
Oh, how do I unblock them? Do you guys know?
If you do it, Jackson, I'm sure they will let you do it.
Yeah, you need to give her a wrench because she's not blue.
Oh, okay. Where? Can she tweet? Can she put something in the live?
Say something in the chat.
Okay, yeah, and then now, sorry about that.
That's right.
All this technology stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Hey, I said say hey, not yo.
There we go. All right, she's the moderator.
Sorry.
But that is the artwork is fantastic. I suggest you look at it and if you like it, give him an attaboy, because it's really good. And
it ranges across a huge time frame, so always be careful to check out. Like he's got ammonites and a lot of other stuff up there, so it's ranging across a huge time frame, not just the Ediacara.
Yeah, and that RJ, that's one thing I did not check for. I did not check to make sure that most of his pictures are of single organisms. And I did check those out, but I did not check to see if he had any assemblages of animals, if they were all from the correct time period. I didn't check for that. But as far as his individual depictions of the various Ediacaran creatures, they're excellent.
Yeah.
So
At
a
least
really
everybody-
silly
Great.
question. A really silly question because I feel like I'm in the presence of educated people. Do you think a single-celled organism could ever develop what we would consider to be intelligence?
No.
Ooh, no.
No.
It needs
What
a
would your
nervous system.
reasoning for that be? Because I have no backing. I would just love to know your views or the reasoning behind that.
Yeah, you need to have multicellular, you need to have cell specialization, you need to have a nervous system, you need to have sensory feedback at very complex levels. Now, a lot of the bits and pieces of things that end up becoming the sensory systems in more complex organisms are actually showing up, but not in the thing, but it's the substrate, the bricks that are eventually building off of that, because there's very, very little genuine novelty in a lot of our nervous systems that aren't coming from things that came from other things. But yeah, there's still an interesting theoretical debate as to whether colonial organisms and social organisms like ants and things can in effect have kind of a functional intelligence, even though individually they're little automatons. And because in effect our brain is a composition of a mass of interconnected automaton cells that produce self-awareness.
That's
But
a
a single
feature of
cell can't do
emergent
that.
properties, isn't it? The ant scenario you just give is a symbol of emergent properties where individual single units are rather simplistic in their actions, but connected they form more complex
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah, it's
Well,
like oh, go ahead, Jade.
I was just going to say, if another example of a complex organization would be the Portuguese man of war.
Oh yeah.
Which
So
is
what
a
would that
colonial.
be? Sorry, I'm uninformed.
It's a jellyfish, if I remember.
No,
It
no,
was
no,
not
no,
a
no.
jellyfish.
No, it's
Not
not a
a
jellyfish.
jellyfish.
Is it a chronophore or something? Chronophore?
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
it's
That's a fauna for you.
Oh, that's a chronophore. Yeah.
what it is it has it's an organism that is made up of a number of colonial organisms.
What is a
Mhm.
colonial organism?
Okay, in other words, it has a whole bunch of different, it's made up of a whole bunch of different parts, different individual cells that all work together. And some of these cells are very specialized. Some of them, it's the word pneumaticist, is that the correct word? I forget. But anyway, some of
yeah.
them are specialized capturing prey, like long tentacles. Oh, go ahead, Jackson.
Oh, I was thinking No, wait, nope, I was wrong. Never mind. I just realized.
I was thinking it looked kind of like a jellyfish. That's why I thought.
Yeah.
Even,
it does.
just a,
Yeah, it does.
That's why I was
Anyways,
thinking that.
so as you were saying,
So as I was saying, so some of them are specialized for capturing prey, and some of them actually have little barbs that will sting prey. Some of them have like little tentacles that will grab prey, and then there are other parts that make the sail that allows it to just float along the ocean. There are other parts that do digesting. And when you look at the Portuguese man of war, what this is this is like a preliminary step on the way to forming tissues and organs.
So can I? So yeah, you said it's a like preliminary step. How really different is that from us? Like we have individual cells that do their job, and that makes up tissues, which make up organs. I might get it all wrong because I'm not educated on that.
Our cells are not. So we're not colonial. All of our cells are all directed to do their specific jobs that they're dictated out as we develop.
Okay, so that isn't a fair comparison. It's not alike for
Right.
us to do.
So there's really interesting work with this algae called the Volvox, and basically these other little different algae. It's like a gonium, and so what happens is these guys they get together and they form these little aggregates where it's these individual cells that come together, but then it turns out they can differentiate. They can give out jobs, essentially different jobs to different members of these aggregates.
Sorry, carry on, Jackson.
Oh no, you go ahead.
So this might be a really stupid question because I've like pointed that out multiple times, but how does something so simplistic do something quite complex like that in comparison to its simplicity?
Well, sometimes organelles or molecular structures can be co-opted into new forms. For instance, coenoflagellates have these different molecular structures that we use for cell-to-cell adhesion. Basically, our cells stick together and can signal each other using things like receptor tyrosine kinases, integrins, and cadherins. And unicellular
chemicals or hormones of some kind.
Yeah, these different little molecular structures, and basically they're in unicellular organisms too, but they're doing different jobs.
What is a unicellular organism? Is that us, the ones that cells have got specific jobs?
That's just one
that's
cell.
your one-celled organism.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
that does make sense because of unicelled.
Yeah. So you take these molecular structures that are in these guys with one cell, and you can co-opt them, or they evolve in such a way that they develop new uses instead of evolving totally new structures.
In I put 2 links in the private chat of single cell to multicellular evolution. If you want them, and if you want to share them with the group, you can, since you have the wrench and I don't. I also shared the.
I'm out here with all the privilege. You're okay, you peasants.
Yeah, I also posted a thing from Oceana.org about the Man of War. If you want to share that too, since
I'll do that.
I don't have those privileges, so I'll let you do that.
Thank you for entertaining my crappy questions, but I really do have those questions.
There's no such thing as a bad question, only good or bad answers.
Yeah.
Well, at least you're not just laughing at how silly they are, so that's a good step.
No, to the contrary. Those are the kinds of things where say, here, explain it to. Everybody is going to find an area that they're dull as a sack of hammers on, that they don't know anything about. And the only way you find out about it is saying, well, I don't understand that. Here's my question. Now you can explain it. And if you don't get a good explanation, it's probably because the person actually doesn't understand it themselves and they can't give you a good answer.
So my question is, these organizational systems, how these cells somehow communicate. I'm sure the scientists know. I'm just saying somehow because I don't know how these cells communicate to differentiate which jobs and who does what, essentially. How does that, could you explain how that actually comes to being, how they actually develop that in the most simplest kind of terms?
Welcome to win the Nobel Prize territory, because they're just working out a lot of that stuff. A lot of the players weren't even identified. The homeobox HOX genes weren't even known until the 1990s. So there was a giant player on the field that we didn't even know was there. The other element that's entered the fray, and Jackson's done stuff on it, is endosymbiosis, where we have mitochondria in our cells. That's an example of an already existing archaeobacterium, the proteoarchaeobacterium, one of the I'm screwing up the names here. He would know better than me. That's been incorporated into the cells that are the ancestors of the multicellular systems that we have. Plants did the same thing with the cyanobacteria that became the chloroplasts. So you can gain more complexity that way. I'd argue that for really interesting organisms that are going to be the kinds that you would be communicating with, you've got to have a sensory inputs. You have to have the equivalent of eyes or something that can have multiple ranges of input. You have to have a nervous system and eventually a brain system that can process that information and make judgments to alter behavior. And then finally, when you get farther down the road to us, you got to be able to make tools and you got to be able to tell stories about them. And at that point, you're in our territory.
Yeah, but the cells don't have those, do they? The single cell organisms that manage to organize themselves don't have what we consider to be any ability to form intelligence. And so that my question is, how do they intelligently, maybe that's the wrong question and I'm completely willing to accept that, but how do they intelligently give each other jobs if they don't have any sensory input? They don't know who the cell next to them is.
So it happens that there are experiments where you can basically force cells to aggregate. There was a experiment with is it Ochromonus? I think was the so they had an algae, and I can't remember the name of the algae, but they also had Ochromonus, which was like a carnivore, or in a tiny carnivore. And basically what they had to do was, or no. I think the Ochromonus was the was the cell that that got together. Anyways, the point is they got these cells to group together in groups that were not too large so that they couldn't distribute nutrients amongst themselves, but also not so small that they were preyed upon by whatever the carnivorous protist was. So basically, you just have it's just really natural selection in a sense. You just get these guys to kind of.
I'm glad you said that because I've kind of come to that conclusion just by listening to you all. So what you're saying is, and I like the fact that people in the chat are thanking me for putting it in layman's terms for them. So what you're saying is that researchers put a bacteria organism that would eat these other organisms together, and they put enough of them so that they could work together to survive in some capacity.
Yes, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Organisms don't always compete; they also cooperate. And so there's a whole literature. In fact, it relates to the idea of how altruism arises in biological systems. It shows up in organisms like fungi and bacteria that have no brains. So
Can you clarify altruism for me?
Okay, I got a question for Jackson.
Where you act on the behalf of somebody that's in somebody else's interest, to benefit to some extent somebody else because you benefit by them benefiting.
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry, what was he going to say?
Cap has a question.
Yeah, my question, like, and it's really Jackson, Jade, RJ, whoever can answer this, right? Because one of you probably know this. But isn't there a like it's like a bacteria or a parasite or something that lives on like a whale's eye? It actually it makes the whale blind, but it serves a symbiotic relationship between the whale and the bacteria. I cannot remember which one it is though.
I'm not familiar with it, but that wouldn't surprise me. Nature is weird.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Whales.
And that comes back to what I said earlier about humans evolving with parasites.
There is one particular parasite that I find fascinating, but also very, very scary at the same time. There is one that invades crabs. And basically makes them zombies to take care of the parasites as
Isn't
a mother.
That
It's like cordyceps, but it's different type.
Oh, okay.
I think
I like that from a video game.
It castrates it and turns it into a feeding machine to serve the parasites.
Okay.
Sorry.
You have it's the Sacculina or something like that. And by the way, I actually used that in a weird little video I did about zombieism.
What is your channel called, Jade? I've been trying to figure it out, but
it's Meleagris felis, but I'll go find it and
just drop me a link in the chat.
I will, but here let me give you the name of it. Because I for my channel long before I had
Carl Zimmer's book Parasite Rex may have mentioned it too. That's a good one to get.
Thank you, Jade. So what was he going to say?
I think it's if my quick Google search was right, I think it was whale louse that I'm thinking of, where they attach on, and it's to an extent beneficial to the whale louse, but it's but it also to an extent, I think, because with it being on there when it attaches on, it also kind of cleans around where it's attached, so it gets food, but that also benefits the whale, if I remember correctly. So yeah,
that's the Sacculina organism that was being talked about that zombifies crabs. It's really interesting. But yeah, I basically created I made a weird little video where I said that it was sort of a variation of the Sacculina that turned humans into zombies via the Tingler. Anybody remember the Tingler?
Oh yeah,
so
Vincent Price.
Yeah, so I kind of made this strange little video where I tied everything together. And Nestle, I'm going to look for that video because what I'm talking about. Nestle put something on the side. There's a video, and I can't remember who did it, but it's I think it's one of the University of California sites where they had speaker talking about early Precambrian life, and one of the things she was talking about is how there are this life form that they have a suspicion is a totally new life form.
Yeah.
In other words,
I think I may have
multicellular.
seen. I think I may have seen that talk before, but I have to put it up. Yeah.
I know I linked it long ago, but I will find it, because she's saying we suspect that this is not an animal, it's not a plant, and it's not a fungus. So it's a completely different form of life that did not survive. Now, it would be interesting if something like that were to be found, like you were talking about at the bottom of the ocean. If we were to find something like that that still existed today, it's a completely different life form. That's suspected to be a completely different life form, something unlike what we know. That would be very interesting. And I will look for that video. And I don't know if it's the Ediacarans. You know, I keep thinking Vendian. I should look up Vendian.
Same name form as the period in which they lived.
Oh, yes.
It's one of the
I know,
classifications of the geology part. I put a link up on the Ediacara biota. There was a review on that. Silacer apparently is the one that first thought they might represent an extinct kingdom, the Vendobiota. But this review from 2014 says, yeah, no, they're probably within the Metazoans.
Yeah, the link I just posted in the chat is one that I think like Jade, Jackson, and I know RJ's seen it, and anyone else who wants to see it, they can in here. It's about the evolution of how land walking kind of developed. And so that was
that was a juicy paper. That was neat.
That was interesting, and I thought I would share that since we're kind of talking about evolution, and then I thought that would be a fun one to share if you guys haven't seen it yet.
Sorry for interrupting. Sorry for interrupting again. Somebody mentioned the cordyceps fungus before, in line of the Sulculina parasite. But the Sulculina parasite is actually a barnacle, a crustacean like the crab. The cordyceps is a fungus or fungi.
Right.
And it's actually also pretty interesting. It's the source of inspiration for the famous game The Last of Us. If you know that game, the video game.
Oh, I know that game.
Yes.
Wait, you said it's like what attaches to the humans' faces and turns them into the creatures.
Yeah. In that video game, they make zombies, but different. Yeah. Different for your typical zombies. They have humans infected with a cordyceps fungus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was an interesting game.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I mentioned Vendian is because I have a suspicion that may be in the title or something of it. Because you're right, Vendian, Ediacaran,
I hear you guys talk about like suspicions you have with regard to these different organisms. I have so far only had one suspicion, and it was confirmed, I have to say.
That's good.
What's suspicion?
And what was funny is RJ was like, "Hey, wait a minute! I've heard this before," and he pulled it up, and like a whole bunch of people had evidently beat me to it. So there was thalattosaurs were closely related to ichthyosaurs. Thalattosaurs is this group of early Triassic aquatic and semi-aquatic reptiles, and so I have a whole bunch of books, and they say that these guys were kind of just their own branch. They weren't really related to much of anything else, and so then turns out they're like sister to ichthyosaurs, and so then they found.
How do you spell it?
Oh, THALATTOSAUR. But it turns out they even found recently, was it Cardarhynchus, which is like the walking ichthyosaur? RJ, have you heard about that one?
What was that? I was just looking up there. Somebody was commenting on the video you did with Pelagia, and I've been jousting with him, and I just got the alert on, and I was about to reply. He calls me a genuine ###############################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################
was referring. I said, have you
So
heard
what
of?
was that about the dinosaurs and the connection?
Have you heard of Cardarhynchus? The walking ichthyosaur.
Oh, yipes! It vaguely rings a bell, but I'd have to check through the.
It was only
technical
found within
literature
the
on it.
past year, I think, or described within the past year.
Yeah, we know that there's always going to be some absolutely delightful stuff that comes up as the paleontologists find stuff that opens up new windows of the stuff that we didn't know was there. And particularly in the early tetrapods, you've got a whole bunch of little branching stuff that's we don't know because of the vagaries of fossil preservation. So yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And we'll wait to see the dust settle about how things work out about stuff.
Yeah,
But
that's that's what hampers the Ediacara stuff, is because we don't have living examples. We've got to do it all by retro engineering or trying to surmise based upon the limited fossil data. That's always a mess.
Well, it's good to know that people are still watching my video with Paul. It's good to know.
Yeah. and as I said, I think in the chat that right now there's a lot of work being done on the Ediacaran. And part of that is because we have new techniques to use. You know, people are taking the fossils and putting them in MRI machines and doing other things like that to get a better look at them. And so there are some new hypotheses out there and some new discoveries. So I suspect in the very near future we're going to get some new information about them. It's very interesting. Including there's a suspicion that they now have a arthropod or a proto-arthropod from the Ediacaran, and some mollusks or proto-mollusks during the Ediacaran. Because one of the things that some people have said is that what really happened during the Cambrian is that animals discovered calcium, or in the forms of like calcium carbonate for shells and calcium for bones, because that was the ability to use calcium to incorporate into their bodies is one of the things that helped the Cambrian explosion, because we see nothing all soft-bodied animals or almost all soft-bodied animals before that.
Yeah. I had a question I was going to ask, but I don't remember what it was.
It happens to me all the time.
Yeah, it was actually on.
Well, what I was thinking was that
it's nice to know that not only old people's minds.
I was thinking we go for probably about the next 20 minutes, and then we'll shut it down at the only real time, which is 4 p.m.
Yep.
No one can argue with me on this.
I agree with
You're
you
in command,
there, Jackson. Central time is the real time zone.
Exactly.
Arcturitas.
Time traveling heathens.
Yeah. Oh boy, Cy doesn't know when he started with that joke.
It goes everywhere now.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, prehistory is a great thing, and I actually plan on. I know I've said this before in other chats, but I plan on moving my channel there towards prehistory in the future. I'm still gonna do creationist related stuff, but I'm gonna move kind of away from creationism and more towards looking at the diversity of life that existed in prehistory that a lot of people don't know about. I'm excited to talk about things like, the aquatic sloth or the sauropod with tail.
Map of time is one of the biggest problems for everybody in the evolution issue, is they don't have a clear map of time, even when they're on our side. So if they don't have that visceral sense of the big picture, other than maybe knowing they were dinosaurs, that hampers their ability to realize all the ebb and flow of all of that vast amount of time, what genes are doing all through that time.
Oh, we also have a question from the audience. Does someone want to explain incomplete lineage sorting?
Ooh.
Wow, that's an opening one. Yeah, well, that's how do you sort out when you have a limited data set, especially the farther back you go in time? And I'm no expert in this area, but that's going to be popping up with cladistic analyses, where they're trying to take the character states of what you do find and then try to figure out what lineages are accounting for their branchings. And inevitably, whenever you come up with a thing like that, there's the odds that new fossil data is going to show up that will need to revise the element. So anybody else want to toss in? I'm sure they can do it in more detail than that, because that's about as far as I can go on my awareness of the term.
Well, explaining incomplete lineage sorting is very difficult without visual aids. Yeah.
Fortunately, I have a PowerPoint.
Yay! Yay! But basically, it is saying the the phylogenetic trees of a single gene compared to between different species doesn't necessarily equal the phylogeny of the entire species combined, because it is very difficult to explain why without visualizing again. But, I can perhaps pull up a good image. Let me see here.
Yeah, they have to accommodate a convergence. They can have to accommodate the fact that something of the particular genetic system is actually broadly represented in their whole lineage. So being able to sort out which one's related to another thing. The other thing I always point out regarding fossil data is that for all practical purposes, every molecular dating for an organism is going to date back before the first fossil representation, because it's probably reflecting gene switches that are going on way before. Oh, God, she's brought up a chart. Yeah, share that away, Nestle.
This one is a particularly good image, because you can see here 3 different species, in this case a human, chimpanzee, and gorilla. And their common ancestor had basically 3 different alleles of a particular gene. And basically the yellow one is more distantly related to the, these different, recap. These 3 different alleles evolved from a common ancestral allele that duplicated. And it duplicated again, which means that these 2, the red one and the blue one, are closer or more similar to each other than to the yellow one. And after speciating, you have some that died up. In blue, in humans, the blue one dies out, the yellow one remains, and in chimpanzees, the blue one remains, and in gorillas, the red one remains. And if you compare these 3 together, you see that, oh, the blue one is more similar to the red one in gorillas, but not to humans, even though humans are more closely related to chimpanzees overall. And that's basically incomplete lineage sorting in a nutshell. Perhaps Jade West can explain it more thoroughly than I.
Excellent example, because the time for all of those are involving living organisms, except for a tiny shred of our human history going back 50,000 years or so, and our Neanderthal cousins. We have no genetic data on our lineage going back farther. And of course, chimpanzees have a terrible fossil record, and so do gorillas have a relatively mild fossil record. Okay. So you're trying to do everything from the genetics of living organisms, and those sorts of little problems. You'll notice that when they start looking at the more details, they're looking at what the genes do, how they're triggered, their cis-regulatory networks. And so you can start piecing together the dynamics of how those gene switches have played out over all of those lineages. And the more data you get, hopefully the better the argument is. Does that clarify some of that for you?
Oh, so sorry, I was checking out the link that Jade provided to me. So say again.
Oh, I was talking about the original question. I've forgotten her name. I can see her face there. Let me click over, find out. Anti-ordinary. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, well, she may be muted or not there at the moment, but one of the things that creation.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, my mic hasn't been working, and I've been trying to ask questions this whole time. Isn't that kind of the basis for a lot of that? Did really clarify it, by the way. Can I say that I actually really understand what you're trying to say? You're saying that with a limited amount of information, it's hard to really make. I might be wrong, but it's hard to really make accurate assertions.
You include all the data you can, and so bit by bit we get a better and better picture of what's going on. And all the best arguments are interdisciplinary, that interconnect things from a lot of different fields to make sense, rather than just treating the gene as just a gene code. It's part of a living organism, it does stuff, and so there's a lot of other connections. And if you read the primary source papers, they're going into all those connections to justify why a particular interpretation of why the gorilla gene ends up being relatively similar to the human gene, more so than to the chimpanzee, because of how it works out in practice.
And I believe
the basis for a lot of religious arguments.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe Jade was going to say something about that, about the claim that 33% of gorilla genes more closely resemble humans than humans are to chimps, for example. Go ahead, Jade.
Well, and of course it depends on what you're looking at. Again, as usual, it's very easy to sort of lie by looking at the wrong data. There's a video out there where I've forgotten where it was, where this a creationist talks about how we are apparently more closely related to mice than we are to chimpanzees. And the problem is it has to do with what part of the genome you're looking at. If you're looking at so basically he's looking at the entire, human genome, the entire mouse genome, and there's I don't know, like 97% similarity or something. Let's just say that number for the sake of it. Well, of course there's going to be a high similarity because we're we are, going way back, to being vertebrates and tetrapods and mammals and placental mammals. So we're going to have a lot of those genes in common because we are all those things, both humans and mice. But if you're only looking at a narrower part of the genome, then you can look at humans and chimps and say, oh, well, we're only 95% close to chimps. So how can we be more closely related to mice than chimps? Well, it's the part of the genome we're looking at, and the creationists ignore that.
Okay, so I'm not trying to be a bitch. I'm just trying to understand it and sort of play devil's advocate a little bit. Isn't that kind of like isn't that selective information? Aren't you saying, oh, I'm going to choose to look at this part of the genome because that confirms what I think, rather than looking at the genome as a whole? Or is there a reason that we can't look at the genome as a whole?
Yeah, because there's too much crap there.
There's a whole lot of
stuff. The genome is
on.
huge, right? There's a whole lot of stuff going on. So what we do is we take, up to a certain point, all mammals have a lot of parts of their genome in common. Now, maybe not exactly the same, but there are certain parts of our genome that define us as eukaryotes, as vertebrates, as tetrapods, as mammals, as placental mammals. Okay, so those things are all in common. So you're not going to find too much difference there. What we want to take a look at the difference is beyond there. Let's look at the parts of the genome that are beyond just being placental mammals. And let's see where the differences are there. It's a bit like, how you look at a graph. Somebody was just pointing one out the other day. Actually, when we were looking at diphtheria, we did this hangout on diphtheria on Fiona's channel, and it pointed out that when you looked at the graph for diphtheria, at one point it looks like it's a straight line because that's it almost looks like diphtheria cases have disappeared because it's a straight line. The problem is that the y-axis on the graph is too big, because at one time there were lots and lots of diphtheria cases. So, but when you get down to only having double digits of diphtheria cases, it looks like a straight line. So then they put it inside of another graph with a different scale that showed, oh no, diphtheria cases didn't disappear. They're just very small, and you can see that graph. And I don't know if this is helping. So we're just trying to look at that one portion that is different. And for example, there's another portion that all primates have in common. Well, if we're just looking at everything that primates have in common, we're going to lose some of the information, or it's going to be harder to see some of the information that distinguishes chimps from humans. So we know we have that in common. So let's look at beyond that. Let's look at, we assume from what we know that chimps and gorillas and humans have a common ancestry. And Freddie, get out of there. So we are going to look at that part of the genome. I don't know if I'm making that very clear, but it's just that we're trying to narrow it down to the parts that are actually different.
This is what I understand by what you're saying, is that we could look at the parts in which there are similarities, but because there's so much information, you have to narrow it down to parts in which we think there's differences so that we can determine the differences.
Right, and we can line them up. Go ahead.
Okay, let's look more closely to like a family level. When we determine paternity, we don't look at the entire genome often. We just look like specific areas where it's very variable from human to human, and those and those differences are very important because those differences are unique to each person, and also shares commonality only with a direct parent. So we can use these small differences as clues to see whether you are related to your mother or your father.
So,
and by extension, you can look at differences between our closest relatives, like chimpanzees and gorillas, and more broadly, you can look at the difference between mammals and fish, for example.
So are you saying that if we just looked at the genome generally, that we wouldn't be able to tell parental who is your parent or not, but if we look at it localized and specifically, we can tell that?
Yes,
because
the entire genome of all humans are basically almost identical, only for a few specific parts. Some parts are variable, highly variable between human and human.
So playing devil's advocate, why is the small variability in contrast to the whole genome more important than the commonality in the whole genome?
Because if you look at, for example, if you have 3 individuals, 2 of them are one is the son of the other, and the third person is distantly related. If you want to determine which of them are close relatives, you're not going to look at the genome, the whole genome, because the whole genome is basically identical between all 3 of them. You only look at the few differences that tells you which of them are closer to the other.
Okay, so you're saying you can only really get valid, useful information if we selectively look at the genome?
Well, it depends on the level you're going to look at.
Depends.
If you're looking at, for example, if you're looking at cell replication, those systems are common to all the eukaryotes. And so there's remarkably little variation because when mutations occur and they vary too much, they end up dead and they don't leave descendants. So you're going to find we utilize the same internal mechanisms that are found in very, very distantly related organisms because our common ancestors developed those first and there's very little change to it. If you're trying to find out whether a particular human is more or less related to another human being, you're not going to be looking at the cell replication system. That's a common element. You need to look at the parts that are going to vary at the fine point level of finding out whether you're a close cousin or not, because you're going to inherit $50 million if you do. Now there's a market incentive.
Yeah, wait, RJ, are you saying I'm a eukaryote?
Yeah, you're a eukaryote. You're a metazoan, man.
Yeah.
Do your gametes push with the flagella from the rear instead of pulling from the front?
Exactly. All of that is true simultaneously.
Right.
And part of the problem that creationists get into, and Jade has obviously spotted this, and everybody that looks into it at any level starts noticing it, is how cherry picking and doubt is cast, so that they'll find a new study overturns and they disagree. So those scientists, they can't agree on anything. No, they agree on a hell of a lot. And they have reasons for agreeing on a hell of a lot. And when you read the papers, you can see what they're talking about. There was that Islamic creationist just a bit down the road that made the mistake of citing a paper where he was trying to argue that the fossil record is really incomplete and therefore you can't make any judgments at all about phylogenies in the past. And he cited a paper that turned out to not be about fossils at all. It was about estimating current microbial variety. And it had nothing whatsoever to do with the Cambrian explosion or fossil data whatsoever. He simply misread the paper. And that because they'll latch on to phrases and buzz phrases, and they may not understand what they mean. That's why it's important for our side to know what the terminology are, to know what the issues are, so we can see easier what it means, and also to see easier how anti-evolutionists might be misrepresenting it.
Yeah.
Well,
And so, for example, the example I used, and again, the numbers are probably not correct, so don't go by the numbers, but the creationist that I'm talking about, who said that, well, we're 90% like mice, but only 95% like chimpanzees. This guy probably didn't even understand what he was talking about. He probably just saw some report somewhere. Yeah, that's right. They rarely do.
I mean,
and looked at this. Yeah. And
So
remember
I think someone
that
in the chat.
we say,
hold on. Let me.
Sorry, Jade, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, don't forget that when we, when we talk about this, looking at only a certain part of the genome, don't forget that we've looked at a lot of mammalian genomes.
Yeah.
come to this conclusion of what we need to look at. And some of those genes are what are called highly conserved, which it means that they haven't changed very much from ancestry to ancestry.
So someone earlier in this live stream said that if you asked a question and someone can't explain it well enough that you understand it, then they clearly don't understand what they're talking about. Well, you clearly all quite understand what you're talking about, because I feel like I have a somewhat of a grasp of what you're talking about.
And I'll say this, I can say, go ahead, Jade.
I was just going to say, sometimes it's very difficult to explain complicated concepts, especially without diagrams. You know, it's you know, we when you know something, it's sometimes hard to filter it through your brain and explain it to someone. Yeah. It's a little bit like we all use certain words all the time, and then someone asks you, "Well, can you tell me what that means?" And you're like,
yeah, that's why the questions are good. Those questions are great.
Yeah, exactly.
They force us to rethink and clarify our own positions so that we now understand it better in the course of explaining it to somebody who is saying, "What the hell are you talking about?"
It's I'm sorry if I've come across annoying asking lots of
questions.
No.
Personally, I have the philosophy that if I don't know something, I need to know that thing.
Yeah,
so if I ask stupid questions, that's just because I'm in the pursuit of the actual answer and I'm not clarified on the subject.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I'm sure, you know, Jackson, RJ,
that's admirable.
Jay,
Sorry.
Everyone will probably agree with this. We want you to ask questions because we want you to be able to get it. So we understand, like, I'm very layman and have a very rudimentary understanding of evolution. Both RJ and Jackson can attest to this because they've been on movie night with me. I have a very rudimentary understanding of things, but I have enough that I can kind of talk on it.
We'll see
kicking and screaming to the truth.
And when you guys are talking about physics on the size movie night, I don't know much of anything about physics, so I can't really say anything with regard to that.
That's where we're like, it's because nobody's an expert on everything. So
I think
we all have to ask the questions that seem basic to people who have the understanding, but they know the person asking them wants to understand.
I'm slightly educated on everything because of YouTube, thank the spaghetti monster.
I have an approximate knowledge of many things.
Yeah,
but I have
no
real actual knowledge of many things. So, like, I have a general idea of physics, quantum physics, biology, evolution, etc. But I don't have many. Like, I couldn't actually teach someone about the things I know because I only really know rudimental understandings of the scientific concepts.
I'm the same.
But I think most people, the average public, I think most of us are like that. Most of us don't have a fucking clue what the high minds and the scientifically minded understand. And so unless we're willing to ask what we consider to be the stupid questions because we're talking to intellectually superior people, we're never actually going to learn the answers that we need.
Yeah, and it's better for us. Alan Alda is somebody that is very inspiring here because he's relentlessly scientifically curious. And he was pointing out about how many scientists are terrible at explaining stuff to non-scientists. And he said that has to change. And
I would 100% agree with that. 100%.
The scientists, so that they can learn better how to listen to good questions or bad questions, to respond and clarify them, and that they will end up being better scientists as a result of that.
I think if you are a scientist that is trying to influence the world and teach the world to some degree, then you're correct. I think many scientists, it's like the principle we brought up earlier. Many scientists are so educated on the topic that they don't realize how uneducated the majority of people are. So like me interjecting lots of questions tonight was just what the average person would really think. They're probably thinking, what the fuck does that mean? And that's the thing. Most highly educated people on this topic don't realize how educated they really are and how uneducated the rest of us are. So when they explain something in such a basic form to them, that is still relatively complex to the majority of people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it is especially bad with all the pseudoscience people, because they all consider themselves to be, paragons of wisdom. Like
many of those pseudoscientists are the reason that I spent so long being a specific spiritual person, because they would present slightly scientific concepts and use that to validate a spirituality, and I was gullible enough to fall for it.
Yeah.
And I think many people, this is why I asked the question earlier, do we think that there is a way to get through to everyone? Because I think many people do genuinely just believe these things because they're gullible in the way that I did. And if we had real knowledge, we probably wouldn't believe those things. But I'm not going to listen to you if you talk to me like I'm a moron, even though I acknowledge I am.
Yeah, I mean, if they're willing to listen, yes, you can get through to them. And that is a really a bad thing with, I would say, anyone in any field, is the using the field jargon when trying to talk on stuff. Because when I first heard evolution in high school, this was how it was taught, which is technically true. It was the changes in allele frequencies in a genetic population that had factors of natural selection applied to it. That was, and I asked my biology teacher about that to try and understand more on it and how all that worked. He didn't understand it, so I started trying to find it, and all I could find was technical jargon. And it's like, people want to know this, and I know I'm guilty of it too, because I was talking to someone who was actually, when I was in school, who was first month, I was trying to explain something and I wasn't thinking about it, and I started using stuff that was readily knowledgeable to me in the design field to a first semester in design, and it just, the look on their face was, they're like, "Can you dumbify that?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot you are." Because you get so used to using them, you don't realize that not everybody understands what you understand.
But it's not really the fault so much as the nature of it. I don't know. I don't know if that's
as an example of not conveying the idea that you are trying to.
Yeah.
For example, when I was a pseudo-scientific spiritual hippie motherfucker,
I put that on the business card.
There's this thing called the interaction or observation principle, and that when you quantum mechanically observe a particle, it collapses the wave function of the particle. And me being someone that knows nothing other than what I just said, then here's a pseudo-scientific spiritual person tell me that, oh, well, the wave function of the particle could never collapse had it not been for a conscious human observing that. But
no,
in
it's
reality,
any observer. It's any observer.
An observer could not, like a human observer, could not observe something that happens on a subatomic level. But because I was so uninformed on the topics, I accepted what they said. Because the reason I accepted what they said is because the scientific community failed in explaining what the observer effect really is.
Yeah,
or people hear observer and think, oh, humans observe.
Yeah, most people do as well.
Yeah, the Schrodinger's cat example, the cat is an observer. So the cat would work out whether it was alive or dead or not, independent of whether or not somebody opens up the box later on.
Well, guys, it is now just past 4, and so it's been just about
don't end it.
3 hours. Well, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut this.
Pull the plug on us.
I do want to say
an amazing chat. Can I just say congratulations, Jackson? I'm so happy for you. I'm so glad that you've got some people that you can educate now.
Yeah, you got way more subscribers than me, so good job on that.
Every appearance I've done, every other person has got more subs than me, and I take the hint, society. Fuck you,
have more than Hey, you got more than me, Anti. I only got like 84.
I'm going to have to sub to you. This is
And I
the
have
first
zero.
time
Well,
we've
I
ever
shouldn't say I have
spoken.
0 subscribers. I do have 123, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm going to subscribe
I'm
to
a
all of
little
you.
under.
Tweet me
I think
after
I'm at
this.
400
Okay,
something around
yeah,
there.
and it's but yeah, again, I just want to say thank you. Congrats on hitting this milestone, and thank you for doing the videos, Jackson, because you have actually helped me get a better understanding of biology. And
Same.
actually, because of you, I actually want to take a biology class in college when I go to K-State to learn more.
Yeah,
And because of
you.
Jackson, I've decided that when I hopefully pursue science, I might consider pursuing biology because of his videos have made me so intrigued at how complex it really is.
I prefer actually like physics is actually what I love. I'm not an expert in the field. I still have to do a whole bunch of it, but that's what I like. And where my passion lies is physics more than anything. I've always loved physics.
Well, I'm sorry to say there probably will not be a lot of physics videos
I learned stuff
in the
that's
immediate or far off
Oh, wait,
future.
hold on. It depends.
very meticulous.
Yeah,
Unless I
once
did
get
like
better-
biophysics, but that would be a totally new direction.
yeah, once I get better at physics, I actually want to once I get through all my physics classes at K-State for my engineering degree, I actually want to start going in and trying to explain physics to people to make it more readily understandable
Good luck
to
with that.
people.
And I mean that.
You can look up
truthfully.
you can look up SciShow crash course on physics, and these are really basic and easy on understandable at the basic level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But see, one of the it's not really a problem per se, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I suppose it could be seen as a problem. Then one of the issues I suppose you could say could happen. It's somebody watches a video, that explains something easy and they think they're an expert.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean it's not like I'm going to go like one of the things that I would do is, since I do go after yaks, I would explain why what they're trying to say is wrong, and then go in and explain to almost in a high school level understanding to that of why this doesn't work, of why we know these things work the way they do, and things along those lines. I mean, when I get done, I won't be an expert in physics. I know that. I'm only going to have up to physics 3.
I think
engineering physics.
I think Jackson does amazing because very few YouTubers, and I think that's why he got so much recognition from Polygeo, because he is unique in the content he produces. I think that's what's amazing about your content, Jackson. I'm going to fangirl here a little bit.
Well, thank you. I do enjoy producing these videos. People ask me to do or give me requests and whatever, and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, Jackson. I benefit a lot from these videos that I do. I get to read the technical papers on eye evolution or the bacterial flagellum or giraffes or what have you. I'm the one who gets to see this stuff. I think that's just as great.
Yeah, and
I think that's a part of any person producing content on YouTube. You kind of have to love what you're doing, or you're not going to be motivated to do it, because it does take a lot of work if you try to make
lazy. I'll admit it, I'm lazy to do videos. It's like, do I really want to make I'll do it later. Yeah, I'll do it later. Tomorrow I'll do it.
What I was going to say is that Jackson's videos make really complex scientific concepts more digestible for the layman's person. And although I'll be sitting there watching some of your videos and you'll say a word that I have no way of knowing what that reference is, most of it you make a really clear, concise understanding of what you're talking about. And many people that are scientifically minded, let's use that term, use the most complex terminology possible. And I don't really think that's the best way to approach the average person. And you do a really good balance of giving them scientific literature, but also explaining it to us.
Well, I do try. And I also, to combat all the creationist nonsense, I link all of my sources in my
Yeah.
description. So
Hopefully they're not quote mined.
well,
You're-
definitely. I mean, see, that's part of it. If you think that I misrepresented my article, or if I did, then
Yeah.
someone can go to the article and say, "Hey, Jackson, this isn't right. This is what the article actually says."
Yeah, your
I have-
your citation bluff list.
Exactly,
Yeah.
my citation bluff list. Exact. I
Yeah.
should
I
start
have
calling
never
it.
Jackson,
watched
I'll
one of
say-
your videos and gone,
Yeah.
oh, I think he's lying. I think he's
Yeah.
misrepresenting
And-
that.
And Jackson, I'll actually say this too. You know, with you kind of inspiring me to want to take at least one biology class in college is one partly because I said because of your videos, but two, I loved biology in high school, and the more I tried to learn on it, the harder it was for me from what I learned in school, because everything else goes from, okay, you have your high school understanding level, now you're getting into all the technical stuff, and it's like, what am I reading? Greek? It's like, just, can you explain it in simple terms, please? And I've started slowly getting a better understanding of it, actually, thanks to you. And now actually I can read through some technical papers, understand what they're saying a little more, and actually get better graphs and concepts of it. And I attribute a lot of that to you, like the link on how the how land walking developed. I read that, and if I would have read that before I watched any of your videos or any of the things, like just talking to people like you, I probably would have been like, this makes no sense. But since I've heard you explain some of the concepts before, I'm like, oh, Jackson explained this, and this is okay. And I'm able to kind of piece a little more together. Not a whole lot more, but a little more that it's more understandable to me. So I do have to thank you for that.
I mean, and going, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and going off what you said, if you were to ask your teacher like what this means, I mean, if you got a good one, they'll explain it to you. If you get a bad one, they'll be like, anyone ever had that? Where you understand something, you try to explain to it.
Definitely.
Yeah, my biology teacher on evolution, actually. I mean, he knew most everything else, but when it came to that, I asked him, and he's like, I can't really I can't answer too much on that because I don't understand it that well myself. And that was kind of disheartening to me, because
But he's a teacher. Wait, what?
He was a high school biology teacher.
My pre-calculus teacher wouldn't explain things to us. If we asked her a question, she'd basically just look at us like, why are you so stupid?
Yeah.
Why are you in this class?
No, Midnight. Nothing, like I said, nothing against my biology. He, on anything else he taught, and you asked, he was able to go in depth into it. It's just that was the one subject he was not really able to, and that's why I was like, it was disheartening, because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to know, but it's just that one teacher in high school. Granted, he was a high school science teacher.
All it takes is one.
Biology, and he taught biology. He taught a little bit of, general science. He taught all these different, subjects. So he had to kind of have a base understanding of it. And it's just, that was the one topic that I had him with that he just didn't know that well. And it was, like I said, it was kind of disheartening, because I couldn't learn about something that I wanted to learn about. And when I tried to, it was, you hit all the technical jargon, and you're like, what the hell am I reading?
And as Jackson just said, I personally think that all it takes is one. When somebody's a kid, right? All it takes is one teacher to mess the kid up. Maybe if you're an adult or a teenager, maybe you can not let it bother you. But you know what I mean? I mean, I could be wrong, but
no, I agree with you. I see where you're coming from.
So, all right.
My message to the resident layman's out there is, go to the YouTube atheist and scientific community, and they are much better than teachers.
Look up Aaron Raw.
I didn't go to school after the first year of secondary school, which is high school in America. And I have learned more from my brief time in education from YouTube than I have from my teachers, who just acted as though I should inherently know something.
Yeah. Just like Jackson just said, the teachers thought you were an idiot. Although I do have a question.
Oh, she left.
Okay.
All right. Although I do have a question for you, and maybe something to ponder. When does a layman stop being a layman? Is that when they get when they get the degree and actually work in the field?
I think never stop being a layman because I acknowledge how complex the universe and reality is. That there is no point in my life that I will ever not be ignorant of most of reality.
Yeah, but even professionals are ignorant of reality.
Yeah, I would say that almost everyone's always going to be a layman at some point.
Yes.
Because even me as a drafter, I don't know everything on drafting. I know when I go to college, my professors who will have PhDs in engineering and civil engineering, because that's what I'm going to be studying, they don't know everything. I can guarantee you that they don't know everything. So it's always,
can I give my answer? I think on some level you are always going to be a layman, but effectively, if you are capable of explaining a thing to someone else and they can understand it, then you are not a layman in a loose sense. Not a layman.
Okay, good. You added the caveat of in a loose sense, because I was going to say, to counteract that, I can explain the wave function of quantum mechanics to some degree, but I wouldn't consider myself in any way not a layman.
You don't know the mathematics behind the wave function, and
Anyway, I think Jackson wants to end the stream.
It's about 15 minutes over.
I want to make one shout out. Aaron Ra just made another video on his systematics of classification of life forms.
Oh yeah,
go check that out, everybody.
I'll have to go watch I haven't seen the new one. I love that series. It's really. I'm always every time I watch it, I learn something new. It seems like that. I'm like, oh, I missed that the first time. I got to remember that, or oh, I forgot about that. I got to make sure I remember that one.
So I gotta say thank you guys for being here. Thank you everyone in the chat for also being here. I had a great time. I hope everybody else did.
I did. I loved it, and I'm so glad you're at nearly 1.5k, Jackson. You'll be there by the morning.
Yay!
Or over.
Jackson, thank you for having my dumb butt on here. I'm always.
I enjoy having everyone on.
Yeah,
I enjoy all different people.
I mean, you don't know me that well, so thank you, I guess.
Yeah.
And I learn from Jackson every time I get to read one of his texts for one of his upcoming videos.
Yeah,
don't you have books published?
Okay, well, back to Jackson. Jackson wants to wrap up the stream, so let's all be quiet.
All right, so I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank you, everybody, and have a nice day.